Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to one and all who are present here. I'm Geeta Varghese from MitKat Advisory, your host for today. We have people joining in from at least 12 different time zones, so that's very exciting. And a very warm welcome to each one of you to MitKat's APAC Risk Symposium 2024. Businesses across. Hence, at MitKat's APAC Risk Symposium 2024, we have industry leading experts with us from across the globe, say Americas, UK, Europe, Middle East, India, and South Asia, who will be helping us to delve deeper into those risks and have thought provoking discussions. So, a few housekeeping announcements before we begin. For those who will be leaving in the middle or will not be able to attend till the very end, can see our discussions on our YouTube channel at their convenience. If any of you have questions, I request you to please put them in the Q&A box, which is separate from the chat box. So before we begin, I will quickly walk you through the agenda for today. We will begin with a keynote address by Lieutenant General Sudhir Sharma, Chairman MitKat Global Consulting. This will be followed by the first panel discussion on Global Risk Outlook 2024, moderated by Colonel S.M. Kumar. We will then have Ms. Shreya Talwar unveiling the APAC Risk Review 2024, followed by a demo of our in-house risk intel platform, datasurfer.ai by Mr. Abhijit Korde. We will then move on to the second panel discussion on APAC Risk and Resilience Outlook 2024, moderated by Mitesh Shah. We then have two special keynote addresses by Mr. Pranjal Sharma, economic analyst and author, and Professor Martin Gill, founder of OSPA, director of World Excellence Awards. We then have the final panel discussion for the day on Technology Risk Outlook 2024, moderated by Pawan Desai. And towards the end, we will have the closing remarks delivered by Mitesh Shah, and that will be the end of our day. So without further ado, we will now begin with Mars 2024 and the keynote address. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce you to Lieutenant General Sudhir Sharma, Param Vishishta Seva Medal, Ati Vishishta Seva Medal, Yuddha Seva Medal, Vishishta Seva Medal, Chairman, MitKat Global Consulting. General Sharma is an acknowledged expert on strategy, defense, homeland, and corporate security. He has held distinguished leadership assignments in India and abroad, including commanding the largest field formation, head of logistics of Indian Army, and military attaché to UK. He advises corporations, diplomatic, defense, and security think tanks, and mentors startups. He is a speaker and author of repute, a strong votary of safe, secure, responsible, and sustainable development. General Sharma, over to you for your keynote address.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you very much. Good morning from India to all my friends. And once again, greetings for the new year to everybody who's listening in. And may the new year be full of challenges, interesting. Something wrong with the video? Can you all see me? Yeah. Okay. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something. Ladies and gentlemen, as we enter 2024, the leap year, and entering the middle of the decade, the world continues to lurch towards a period of, I would say, rebalancing and realignment. Geostrategically, we are at a pivotal moment in history where there are two wars are raging, and there are multiple hotspots across the world which threaten international stability. In fact, it's for a very long time that we've entered a new year with so much geopolitical fragility around us. I'm reminded of a quote by the revolutionary Lenin, who said, "There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen." I wouldn't say weeks, but in the last few months from October 7th, I think many decades worth of geopolitics have taken place in the world today. And we are passing through a very fragile period. Asia Pacific, though, feels that it may be a little away from the war thing, but it is affected deeply by what happens in the world because, like it or not, we are so interconnected that anything happening anywhere will affect us in Asia Pacific also. Now, you look at the war in Ukraine entering its third year, it's reaching a very dangerous point in the war. It all depends on how the American election goes, and I would say that upper hand at the moment looks like it's with Russia, unless European Union and America can really put some money and things together. The war is likely to end not in favor of Ukraine if the things go on this way. And as far as the Hamas-Israel war is concerned, while they're inching towards a hostage deal, I hope it goes through, purely for humanitarian reasons. But there is alignment taking place between America and its close allies and the rest of the world. There seems to be a difference cropping up in how to perceive this part of the world. I don't know how it will pan out, when the two-state solution will work, but it affects Asia-Pacific deeply because of the Houthis which have got involved in the Red Sea area. An entire trade of Asia-Pacific traverses through the Red Sea. And if this thing continues for a long time, which I think it will, then we have a problem in front of us in far as trade is concerned of Asia-Pacific. So both Ukraine war, which affects the energy prices, commodity prices, and food prices, and the Red Sea, which affects our trade, are all affecting us directly or indirectly. And therefore, it is in the interest of Asia-Pacific that the war does not spill over to the Asia-Pacific geographies, because that will be very bad, because I strongly feel that Asia-Pacific is at the epicenter of the geopolitics of the world. And the new world order will decisively be shaped in the Asia-Pacific region. Like we have swing states, I think Asia-Pacific region is a region which is going to affect the complete balance of the world order, where it goes and how it moves around to that place. Also, I feel as the nations in Asia-Pacific rise, they become stronger, both economically and militarily. Geopolitics, can you see me, please? Hello? Yeah, something wrong with my...
No, it's going fine.
Nations in both economically and militarily, geopolitics and geoeconomics will play out in multiple dimensions, creating complex patterns of cooperation, competition, and conflict all at the same time, because everybody has to look for its place in the sun. Therefore, I feel a strategic new normal is taking place, which is perma risks and political crisis going on all over the world. We must be aware that Asia-Pacific is the powerhouse of the world. 60% of the world population resides here. 45% of the GDP is generated in Asia-Pacific. Last year, we had a GDP of 45 trillion. Our world GDP was about 105, 110 trillion. So about 45% of GDP of the world takes place in Asia-Pacific. And yet, we are growing at a rate of 5 to 6%. While the rest of the world is not only slowing down, looking to a recession, or maybe picking up a rate of 1 to 2%. So in 4 to 5 years' time, you can see how the economic dynamics will change of Asia-Pacific vis-a-vis the world. And therefore, the competing powers of US, Russia, China look towards Asia-Pacific in the area which they would like to influence or be part of their sphere of influence. And that is where the trouble will brew up. In addition to that, there are strategic fault lines in Asia-Pacific itself, which includes, as you know, Taiwan, the South China Seas, the problem taking place between China, Vietnam, Philippines, and the rest of the world. The Korean Peninsula is a little fragile. We heard the South Korean president showing concern that North Korea may interfere in the April elections of South Korea. India-China standoff always continues and always tension is there. So besides these fault lines, these are the ones which we have to take part and care for it. Otherwise, we can continue to grow the way we are growing. Excuse me. Next thought which comes to mind is that this is going to be the year of the elections. Already taking place in Bangladesh and in Taiwan. Now, 8th February, we have Pakistan. Then we go on to Indonesia, Korea, Mongolia, India. So all sorts of big elections are going to take place. And in a democratic setup, the domestic elections have a great agenda for how geopolitics will play out. I hope things go out well. It is my assessment that as we see today, that a amount of status quo seems to be taking place in as far as elections are concerned, and I don't see much difference taking place as it's seen in taking place in Taiwan and in Bangladesh. So hopefully things will remain stable as that is concerned. Coming towards climate change, which is an area of concern for Asia Pacific, I think not only does it create extreme weather conditions and create problems for the country, because we have got very little adaptation capabilities in our region. It also creates more conflicts because of rising water levels and because of resources. So climate change affects us economically and also creates tensions within the region because of this area in South China Sea and also places like Bangladesh, Vietnam. So something which you got to be very careful about because it affects Asia Pacific in a big way. There's a feeling that artificial intelligence may affect the Asia Pacific region. I'm not too sure this will happen because Asia Pacific is a very mature region and they've been able to adapt to digital technologies quite well. And while artificial intelligence is seen as a threat to some, it may be able to cope with it should it be doing it in a proper manner and be able to handle it properly. So in a sense, I would like to say that Asia Pacific is the powerhouse of the world. We must ensure that it remains isolated from the conflicts which are taking place around us, which is difficult. We are able to manage our geographies well. Somehow I feel that we have the resilience and the innovation and maturity to go through to the next year with much more confidence, and we'll be able to do it well. Despite all this risk, I personally feel Asia Pacific will come out with a strong 2024, managing its risk the way it is doing, provided things continue the way they are and not make changes take place, which is a very big thing to say. So overall, I look at Asia Pacific positively, and thank you all for listening on, and I wish you all great deliberations because I'm looking forward to hearing all of you in your panel discussions. Thank you.
Wow, General Sharma, thank you so much for that very interesting take. All the geopolitical and socio-economic dynamics that are there across the globe and the role that APAC will play as a powerhouse. You have truly set the tone for what seems like a very enriching day for us. So without further ado, we move on to our first panel discussion for the day, which is Global Risk Outlook 2024, moderated by alumnus King's College London, IIM Calcutta, and Staff College UK, Colonel Sam Kumar. He is the co-founder and MD MitKat Global Consulting. His brief bio and LinkedIn profile are placed in the chat box. Over to you, sir.
Can you hear me? Yeah, somebody
Yes,
can
sir.
confirm.
Yes, we can. Loud and clear. Looking good.
Thank you very much. And so thank you, General Sharma, for the excellent overview. Thank you, Nikita, for keeping it really brief. Otherwise, bios can really run into pages. So ladies and gentlemen, namaste, greetings. Warm welcome on behalf of MitKat Global Consulting Pte Limited, Singapore. We have a diverse and distinguished panel today to discuss the Global Risk Outlook 2024. Very committed folks. Two of them, Bruce and Irina, are joining. They're still on the 1st February. So they're still joining on a late night from the US. We have Farah joining at 4:30 a.m. from London. And we have Cyprian, Pramod, and Nicholas joining early winter morning from Europe. Of course, we have Burgess, a partner with a Big Four, who has shuffled his day to be here. So everyone, so thank you, esteemed speakers. We appreciate your commitment and looking forward to an exciting discussion. The panelists, not in any particular order, let me have the pleasure of introducing Bruce McIndoe, thought leader, author, speaker, and advisor on risk management, technology, geopolitics, intel, and security. An acknowledged entrepreneur, founder of iJet or WorldAware, a leading global OSINT provider. He led the development of continuous risk management model, CRMM, which is industry standard. He was recognized by Business Travel News as one of the 25 most influential executives in business travel industry. MS in computer science from Johns Hopkins, worked with NSA, CIA, DOD, and NASA, and there will be a lot of stories, I'm sure. He's adjunct professor at University of Maryland, tech startup board advisor. Oh, thank you, Bruce. Always a delight to share the stage with you. This is the 6th consecutive year you are joining on a late night from USA.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Farah London, the Order of St. George. She has a lot of decorations, so I'll not read all of them, but just the big ones. She was a mayoral candidate for London elections 2021, visionary entrepreneur, 24 years of rich and diverse corporate and entrepreneurial experience. Farah drives successful initiatives across 6 continents in global trade and investment. She's founder of an award-winning global forum, Back to Business International, has facilitated hundreds of millions, maybe a few billions of pounds of trade and investment around the world. She has been underwriter for one of the largest reinsurers, so writing multi-billion pound policies all over the world, in areas of our interest like terrorism, political violence, kidnap and ransom, piracy, liability. So warm welcome, Farah. Appreciate your commitment joining at 4:30 a.m. Dr. Ciprian Dan Costia, over 15 years as chair, vice chair, member, board of directors, and top management across sectors, auto manufacturing, international consultancy, banking, capital markets, and stock exchange. Ciprian has a strong educational background, PhD, and a postdoctoral research in finance and accounting. He's involved in public policies, politics. He's a regular on primetime television, international business summits, and global meetings. Strong international network with top global business and political leaders. So if you have any work across the world, you know where to go. He advises organizations on economic policies and global strategies. Ciprian is a global citizen, do-gooder, and passion for new cultures and peoples. So warm welcome. Also heard a rumor that he's, likely to be the prime minister of his country. So
Thank you very much.
him. Okay. He joins us from Romania. So next, Pramod Bhatt. Pramod is based in France, a good friend. He currently manages global security for ABY in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. So pretty much more than half the globe. So he has over 2.5 decades of rich and diversified experience in security and risk management. Pramod has worked with risk consulting, banking, and government sectors in leadership roles in Asia with distinction. Warm welcome, Pramod. Nicholas Michelin is the managing partner at Dubai-based Confluence Consultants. Joins us from Paris, worked for 15 years in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan. He was a French government economist and working in Hong Kong, and later as a financial analyst with KPMG. He's been portfolio manager with Schroders in Singapore, and also a strategic and business intel consultant specializing in Global South. He's the founder and editor of Asia Power Watch, adjunct professor at leading B schools in France, 3 of them at least, and International University of Monaco. So warm welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you, Sam.
Irina Zuckerman is a national security lawyer and geopolitical analyst. Joining us from New York, she specializes in energy security, information warfare, emerging threats, and threat actor networks. Irina is the president of Scarab Rising Inc., a strategic advisory specializing in security, geopolitical risk, reputation management, crisis communications, crisis management, intel, and information warfare. And finally, Burgess Cooper, EY India cybersecurity partner and deputy leader. And Burgess is a well-known name in cybersecurity in this part of the world. So let me quickly introduce the topic. We are well on time. So during my conversation with Bruce just before this panel, he said, Sam, there is a lot going on globally, the most since the Second World War. I could not agree more, Bruce. And General alluded to some of them. Geopolitics is trumping geoeconomics, 2 hot wars in Europe and Middle East, many regional and local conflicts, protectionism undermining the fundamentals of global trading system, super cycle of elections, climate a ticking time bomb, rise of China, weakening of Russia, the rise of middle powers, protests are back from Argentina to France and beyond. APAC continues to be a region of immense promise and inherent fragility, and we'll have panel 2 discuss that. And we're also witnessing rapid technological shift, generative AI, rising cybersecurity threats, deepfakes, and misinformation. So panel 3 will delve deep into that, but maybe Burgess will today give a very brief introduction to that. So to decode what is happening and what's likely to happen in 2024, let me turn to the analysts, and I will not stand between you and the panel. So, Bruce, as you said, a lot happening globally, the most since World War II. Can you compress it in all 3 minutes? And we have a lot of experts from Europe. So can you talk us through A, the emerging global order, B, what's happening in Middle East, and 3, what's happening in Africa?
Sure. Yeah, 3 minutes. Okay, ready? So I'm going to do an arc because it's tectonic shifts in the world order. First level, US down, that is exacerbating and creating all this opportunity for change and conflict. But the world order had been very stable since World War II with the US-led world order. However, in the last years, we are moving to a bipolar or potentially a multipolar world, as centered in Asia, I think, as the general said, and that's true. And the US has been pulling back its investments as a world leader, but also when it comes to using its military directly. It'll fund others, but not so it's reticent to get in. So that's created the volatility and the uncertainty that we've had, but also opportunistic window for nations. So I'm going to focus on the three, and one quickly is, of course, China and Russia, which are the big players, and they've taken advantage of this U.S. reticence to, kind of assert their own and asserting their own interests, and led to lesser powers and autocrats that we see around the world taking also a window of opportunity to assert their role and their desires, whether it's internally or externally. So I think that I would, kind of assert that we're going to be balancing in these three major players, which is the US, China, and India, in a dynamic competition, coexistence, cooperation, and we're going to see where that evolves over the next 20 years. So that's where we are with kind of China and Russia as the major dominant powers, with India rising. In the Middle East, we talk about World War II. This started in the fall of the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I, right? In the 1920s. So all of this, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, all of these communities, the Arabs, the Kurds, the Jews, the Greeks, the Turks, everyone had an opportunity to regather and reform and create their homeland, their nation state. Some were successful, like the Greek, Turk. Some were not, like the Kurds and the Palestinians. In 1949, when Israel kind of self-declared its state with a little help from the UN and the Brits, that was never agreed on with Arabs. And so we have been in a constant, conflict and flux with this conflict since that time, right? And so this is nothing new, and it's been there, and it's bubbled up and down. But I feel like right now there is an opportunity and great pressure, luckily, between Arabs, the US, and others, I think, to come to a grand bargain to try to get to a two-state long-term solution in the Middle East. We will see what others think. But we do have 10 armed conflicts active, and why everyone is concerned that those may ultimately converge and combine with and drawing Iran in, and we could have a much broader Middle East war. So grand bargain or Middle East war are the options. Finally, in Africa, again, that changing of the world order with France retreating from Africa, and has led to a shift there in influence and other powers, notably, again, China and Russia, somewhat with Turkey, coming in and inserting their desires within Africa and realigning alliances. And we have 35 armed conflicts active right now in the continent of Africa. And so that's where we start this conversation of 2024.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping to 3 minutes. So I'll give you 1 minute additional.
Oh,
Americans on the panel always come in for extra attention. So despite half the world going into elections, there is one that is grabbing disproportionate attention globally. And then, Americans love to talk about their gubernatorial and presidential elections, and nobody's interested. But this time, everybody seems to be interested, and Americans are not interested. So from your perspective, from your perspective, how will the outcome of upcoming US presidential elections impact the trajectory of global events?
I think clearly, the US has an kind of bearing impact on everyone globally, right? And we cannot have a more stark outcome in front of us, likely Biden, Trump. Okay, it's unlikely there'll be anything different than that. It's very simple in my mind. If Biden continues his administration, it'll be a steady hand, focus on economic growth, and supportive of the international order as it's evolving, and reticence to have active military engagement by the US. If we see Trump come into a second term, we already see that what's going to happen is there'll be more internal chaos, unrest, angst with an inwardly focused US, which will draw them back from the international stage, which we saw in the first Trump administration, which will cause and enable opportunists, China, Russia, and others, to step and be more forceful filling that void. So I feel like steady versus chaos at home and the world stage becoming more dynamic.
Thank you for explaining that. And when I speak to global leaders, Bruce, there is an apprehension in them that if Trump were to win the election, and it's a very, very likely possibility, US could turn inwards. I mean, it could turn its back on some of the long-term allies. A retreat could probably create a power vacuum. This could leave allies exposed. And as you said, this could tempt adversaries to heighten their ambitions.
It will.
Yeah, so completely. And Irena was smiling. I saw that, on that. Probably we'll come to you later. So let me go to Dr. Ciprian. So Ciprian, to you for your opening remarks. Can you pick up 3 trends? One immediate one, maybe election super cycle, because everybody has been alluding to that. One medium term, say disinformation, or it could be maybe long term also, and maybe one very long term like climate risk. So maybe you could cover in 3 minutes.
Absolutely. The idea is that usually when I'm looking to risks, I try to put all the risk between 2 major frontiers. And these are the risks which can be influenced by people, by human beings. And the other part, the other limit is the risks which cannot be influenced by the human beings. Between 2 frontiers, there are always moving different types of risk. And in this particular moment, there are 3 special risks for this year, which are most important. First of all, we must say that the number 1 risk in this particular year, and this is a particular risk number 1 for this year, is the political risk, which comes from the elections which are happening in the world in this year. Because there will be over 80 countries and jurisdictions where there will be held elections, and about 52% of the human population is living in countries where there will be held elections. It's the year with the highest level of elections in the history until now. And this is the number 1 risk because, and I'm also involved in politics, and I know, when there are happening elections, there can be a lot of crazy things said by the politicians. There can be crazy outcomes from the elections as results, and this can generate huge changes, not only locally, but also globally. And this is very important. Taking into consideration the size of the elections in this year, I consider the number 1 risk, the political risk in this year. And it's a particular year related to this type of risk. The second, and this is also connected to what's happening in the elections, I consider the second ranking risk in this year, the disinformation and misinformation risk, especially those which are generated by the artificial intelligence. Because in this moment, the artificial intelligence architecture is still developed. People, scientists, politicians do not really know exactly the power of the artificial intelligence, and there are still no clear limits between what the artificial intelligence can do and what we as people, as leaders, can influence related to the artificial intelligence. Especially connected to the elections cycle in this year, the misinformation and disinformation which can be generated by the artificial intelligence is also highly ranked risk for this year. On the third side, there is the very largely discussed climate risk. And here we include everything which is related to climate, not only the rise in the global temperature, not only the carbon emissions, but we can also include those kind of things which I told you that we can call that kind of risk which we cannot influence and which can be generated by all kind of natural disaster which are totally unpredictable. These are the number 3 risks for this year. Related to Europe, we must say very clearly that in Europe there will be held elections too in many countries, including Romania. But also at European Union level, in this year, in June, there will be held elections for the European Parliament. And this means that actually all the European Union members will be involved in this massive transnational electoral process. And this is why also Europe will be very, very connected in the turmoil of political risk, along with United States, of course, and along with, I consider very important, India, which is actually the largest democracy in the world. So this is how I see for this year the major risks.
I'll come to Ukraine, Black Sea probably when we have time in the second round, because I know Romania shares a big border with Ukraine. I mean, if my geography serves me right.
Exactly.
But we'll go to Nicholas, because you raised a point about climate. So Nicholas, you are an economist with rich exposure to the West and to the East. So can you talk us through the key geoeconomic trends, the trade wars, which are not kind of very loud, but still very effective, and ESG, which I see is becoming more of an instrument of economic warfare. I mean, people like China and all, which had been left behind, now they're saying, we'll define it like this, and nobody wants to be left behind. Everyone wants a share of the pie by defining it as per their own convenience. So Cyprian is laughing. So maybe we can have your thoughts on some of these mega economic trends.
Absolutely, Sam. First of all, before I go into geoeconomics and ESG, I just want to continue on what Cyprian was saying on the political developments in Europe. Not only do we have this massive European election coming up in June, so where all the members of the EU will be voting for European members of Parliament, we are in the middle of what I would call a perfect storm in terms of social peace in Europe. And I think Pramod can relate to this because he's also based in Paris. As we speak, we have French farmers laying siege to Paris, blocking most of the roads, all the access to Paris. The city of Lyon, France's second largest city, is completely encircled by demonstrating farmers who are blocking all of the accesses. And most of the other French cities, we are seeing the same thing. We just had the same event happening in Germany a couple of weeks ago. Remember, last year it happened in the Netherlands, and this pretty much led to a right-wing anti-Islam candidate winning the legislative elections in the Netherlands. So 2024 is going to be a year of turmoil, of social turmoil. I am not far from saying that this could be the year where we start picking up the first weak signals of low-intensity civil war in Europe. Do remember that we still have continuing terrorist attacks all around Europe, very low-key attacks. Most of them now are not even reported in the press anymore. It happens virtually on a weekly basis now. So I think this level of political and social discontent in Europe is something that people will have to be watching out very carefully. Now to geoeconomics. I think one of the main trend is going to be geoeconomics for 2024. And I'm going to subdivide geoeconomics in three sub-themes. First of all, I think we're going to see an acceleration in what we call mini-lateralism. So those smaller trade agreements, where countries get together because they feel like multilateralism as it is embodied by the WTO, for example, does not work for them anymore. Minilateralism means two things. It means that the baddest dude on the block, if I may say so, gets to control basically the discourse for those people who are joining us today and who are interested in Asia. We have the example of RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is now the world's largest trade agreement, about 1/3 of world GDP, 1/3 of world population, mostly controlled by China. It means that it reshuffles all the cards, all the geopolitical cards, because it forces people, countries to get together in spite of their strategic alliances, and it puts geography back in the center of the narrative. So that's one, minilateralism. The second sub-theme on geoeconomics is BRICS Plus. I mean, we've just started the year with 5 new additions to BRICS, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, Egypt, and Ethiopia. it's interesting to see that the first wave of enlargement of BRICS is mostly happening in the Middle East. The current war between Israel and Hamas and the risk of this war expanding a little bit further to the region asks the question whether, you know, this momentum in BRICS enlargement will continue. Will it have to pause? It was interesting to see that Argentina, with their new president Milei, decided not to join BRICS initially and to actually go for the reverse plan, which is re-dollarizing the economy. Let's see how that goes. But this is something that I believe we will need to look at very closely. And the third subtopic on geoeconomics is definitely economic warfare. And I do believe that 2024 will be marked by a continuation in the economic warfare we've seen you know, over the past few years, but it will be a softer one. I think the times of sanctions is over. I think there is such a thing as sanction fatigue from anyone. Sanctions do not work. I mean, we have the latest data that are coming out of the IMF concerning the Russian economy that shows that Russian economy is growing much faster than the EU, even though it is under sanction. Russian banks are recording historical profits. So sanctions definitely do not work. And if anything, sanctions make it even more interesting for global South economies to try and join BRICS, because one of the major leverage that the US has, and Europe for sanctions, is the use of the US dollar. So this whole idea of de-dollarizing the economy, which is basically the backbone of BRICS, is getting much more attractive. And then finally, ESG. I think one thing that COP28 taught everybody is that everybody's talking about ESG, especially the E and the S part. Everybody has its own definition. And I, for one, I'm quite happy to see that countries like the UAE were able to promote an alternative definition of what is environmentally responsible and socially responsible. Quite far from the radical ESG definition that Europe and the US has, also quite different from the very exotic definition that the Chinese have. So I think the fight on ESG norms and standards will continue, and it will become one of the main fights for economic warfare between the US-led part of the world and China-Russia-led part of the world.
So, interesting thoughts, Nicholas. Thank you. Irina, to you for your opening remarks. What key trends are you picking up in your areas of expertise? Geopolitics, energy security, cybersecurity, and more, but in 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. I think the biggest single trend that we should be watching out for is the coalition of state and non-state actors. And I don't just mean proxies like militias, terrorist organizations, and grassroots movements. I'm also talking about the role of corporations, NGOs, media, and other soft power institutions, and in the effort to grow their own role in geopolitics, to take on a greater role as political actors, sometimes complementing and sometimes competing with government and state actors. At times of crisis, these non-state actors have a particular opportunity as liaisons, intermediaries between powers as they struggle among themselves, but also as allies and as mercenaries that advance the agendas of different structures and interests. To that extent, they will, on the one hand, suffer from geopolitical risks from various conflicts and challenges that we observe. They will continue to suffer the impact of supply chain disruptions, information warfare attacks and campaigns, and conflict-related investment risks. But at the same time, they can be contributing actors to the creation of these geopolitical risks by nature of the services that they lend. They, of course, can also play an opposite role in mediating these risks and mitigating the damage. But we can see that we will have a two-tier structure of conflicts taking place: state level conflicts and non-state level actors that are promoting and advancing the resolution or the complication of these goals. In terms of energy security, we are going to be seeing a lot more in terms of the economic warfare in a different form from what Nicholas mentioned in terms of sanctions. So rather, we should be looking at the economic warfare through the competition for rare earth minerals and the economic goals to restrict the great powers competing for these minerals from advancing the effects. To that extent, US and some of its allies, including Japan, have attempted to restrict China from and in Russia from getting advanced AI chips, semiconductors, both the final product and technologies. Meanwhile, China has started to move to restrict access to raw materials. We're seeing other instances, the dumping of the nickel by Indonesia, serving the China's goal in advancing the use of nickel in its cheap nickel and stainless steel agenda, just as Japan is about to purchase US steel. As a complete coincidence. And of course, we are seeing the race to rare earth minerals all over Africa as powers compete for access, but also for security towards that effect. All of that, of course, in the process of electrification, in the process of creating alternative energies, but also military equipment becomes a part of a much bigger economic war, advancing different economic and geopolitical goals. Finally, in terms of cybersecurity, very briefly, we are seeing waves of attacks on cyber structures, private and government agencies, and they're becoming increasingly more successful despite greater awareness of risks and greater awareness of the rise of the importance of the human element in these structures. So what is the weakest link that everyone is missing? What is missing from being able to prepare for these types of proliferating attacks by state and non-state actors acting in concert to advance both criminal and cyber war goals? The fact of competing interests inside the defensive architecture of cyber companies. The professionals who are hired often have conflicts of interest in their backgrounds as cyber criminals termed white hat professionals.
So
That
Irina,
is something to watch for.
Irina, we have a big cybersecurity expert on the panel, so probably I will can I just kind of butt in there and invite Burgess there, and then we'll come back to some of the themes because you have plenty more to talk about. So we'll come to that.
Excellent.
So can we go over to Burgess? And Burgess, I'll pick it up from here only. Cybersecurity is absolutely disruptive and game changing. So what trends do you foresee for 2024? And you can pick up from where Irina had left.
Thank you, Irina. You quite sort of started the discussion. I'll take it forward. First thing is we've seen and we've spoken earlier also. The first trend I see is there's AI for cybersecurity and cybersecurity for AI. There's a big distinction there. AI for cyber is utilizing the power of AI to enhance cyber tools, and so are the bad guys utilizing that. But the more important trend is how can you use good cybersecurity and privacy for AI, meaning responsible AI. You know, as companies are developing lots of use cases for AI, the biggest thing coming up is responsible AI, privacy, security, accuracy, ethics. The whole factor is coming in, and I see a big trend out there. Responsible AI. Next, we see a trend in India has now passed the DPDPA Act, and we've seen lots of sort of action coming on there. Hence, we see lots of new stuff like the PET technologies and data limitations and different types of security and privacy enhancing techniques, which is coming in. So it's a big trend on privacy, which is taking over. The next trend is, and I can allude to it later, the spending on cybersecurity. Earlier spending on cybersecurity was, if you see the age-old NIST framework, was identify, detect, protect, respond, recover. 80% of spending was happening on identify, detect, protect. 20% on respond, recover. We see a huge change. Now it's almost nearly equal or more money is being spent on respond and recover and not just hoping that firewalls will protect, knowing that with the attack surface area increasing too much, it's difficult to protect everything else. So assume breach scenarios, and if and when, and that will always happen when you get breached, how do we come out of that? ESG was mentioned. Again, the privacy aspect of ESG and security governance part is, depending how you define it, is coming in a big trend. Security products deployment on the cloud, again, a big trend as more and more companies go cloud in a hurry. Security products delivered through the cloud, huge. Earlier it was 90 to 10. We're seeing a 40-60, and it's again a McKinsey and a EY and the Gartner reports which mentioned that, which confirm that spending security on cloud delivered products, and hence concepts like observability and all are coming in. So these are some of the big trends coming in. AI for cyber, cyber for AI, responsible AI, DPDPA Act, and controls on pet technologies, which are privacy enhancing technologies. Spending for AI increasing more towards respond and recover. Security products being delivered to the crowd, and concepts of observability and other concepts coming. Back to you, some of the big trends we see in our market.
Thanks. I think you set it up very well, and you stuck to your 3 minutes. So thank you for that. And I will pick you up probably in the second round on a little bit more on spending, where CA is spending. So I hope that's fine. So you can probably put thoughts around that. So
summarizing that.
Thanks. So Farah, thank you very much. And sorry to wake you up early again in the morning. So Britain is a nation that has always punched above its weight. Okay. And you reminded me, Great Britain, not the little England. Okay. So how are things in UK, and how are things looking within, and how are things looking globally from UK? So just, I'll keep it open-ended. It's all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. UK, it's an interesting time. Yes, you're correct. We had an empire. We conquered the world, but we are in dire distress. We have elections this year. We've got the Mayor of London elections happening in May. And the rumours are that there may be a general election in May, which we do feel would be suicide for the Conservatives because their ratings are dismal. And now there's rumours of a coup happening to take down Rishi within his own party because they do not have faith that he can win the general election. But let's be honest, whoever they bring will not be able to win. The Conservatives, unfortunately, will lose this election. We cannot see any hope for the Conservatives winning. However, I don't feel Labour will have, yes, they will definitely take a lot of seats from Conservatives. I don't feel they will get a majority because they haven't been very popular, especially on their Gaza stance. So it could be a coalition government. And I feel Lib Dems will be holding the cards. So should the Conservatives start buddying with Lib Dems now? Or should Labour be actually making that relationship? So yes, it is an interesting time. However, you never know. Rishi might buy time. He might be able to hold on to his power, and the election may happen in autumn. But I'm just going to touch on, obviously, some great conversations we've had from the panel. And I want to talk a bit, touch on some of what Bruce said and Nicholas. And let's talk about China and Taiwan. Now, obviously, we know how this situation is unfolding. China is not too happy with the elections that results have happened in Taiwan. And you have to understand, China is easily provoked. Let's look at their buying habits in 2023. They have been mass buying commodities such as sugar, rice, oil, wheat, and putting them into storage. Are they getting ready for war? But this is the next question. Would they do war under the Trump administration? Probably not. I do feel they would under Biden because they know Biden will put boots on the ground. And they're quite comfortable knowing that. Because Trump is unpredictable. Trump is crazy enough to go to war with China, but not Biden. And this is where I feel BRICS comes into play. Now, it was only 12 hours ago, Reuters has announced, Saudi officials have said they haven't officially joined BRICS. They've accepted the invitation, but they haven't officially joined. And the only thing I can say why that is because Saudi is very clever. And I feel they are going to shift and become the major mediator in the region, surpassing Turkey. And they play a very key role. And they maybe are still contemplating about BRICS because they can see the tension between US, China, and Russia. So should they stay and hold that mediating position? I think it sounds like a good idea. Now, here's a question. If Trump was in power, would BRICS have even happened? I don't think so. I know Bruce has talked about Trump has an inward agenda. However, he has an ego and he loves international politics. He always gets involved. Look what he did with North Korea. He wants to be out there internationally. And Trump has very close relations with Saudi. We saw that the first country he visited was Saudi Arabia. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens. The UK's role, it depends who comes into power. With the Conservatives, yes, they will always, follow the American lead. But Keir Starmer, I don't feel he has a backbone for going to war. So it will be interesting to see Starmer's agenda. Starmer will definitely go more inward because we do have a crisis in the UK. We have cost of living. We are in such horrendous conditions in the UK with crime, knife crime. So he does need to turn inward. So I don't feel Keir Starmer's agenda will be international.
So I think when you were saying about talking about Taiwan and Trump, and also Bruce was smiling. Bruce, will come to you in the second. And Pramod, of course, I haven't forgotten you. So thank you for waiting so patiently. The world is getting increasingly polarized. We are seeing lots of friction happening at the global level and regional friction points. You have US, Europe, and West Plus, US, Europe, probably Japan, Australia. So so West Plus, we'll call it China plus Russia and Russia plus. So there's a lot of friction, global, regional, local. We don't have time for local, so probably in 3 minutes we can cover global. I know you do a lot of these war games and simulation exercises, drawing on your military learning and then vast corporate learning across the world. So can we just amplify it, all of it, and decode for us in 3 minutes?
Sure. Thank you, Sam. I think I'll give a perspective from how we look from the we call boots on ground, or you can call it our way of looking from our prism. So what we see here is the two big blocks again coming back to the life. We can probably say, okay, US plus a block, and then you have China plus half Russia plus block. Now, whenever you have this situation, there is going to be friction in them, right? When there's a friction, and friction has a lot of fallouts, and we clearly see the fallout which has impacted companies across the globe. One of the friction we clearly see is the Ukraine-Russia war, which has directly impacted us. And there is going to be more and more friction between these two emerging blocks, fighting for natural resources. You already see the West Africa, Bruce mentioned about how the region is becoming unstable with a lot of military coups, a lot of influence of China increasing in Middle East and West Africa as well. So one side you have these global blocks, but there are also regional blocks. I would say it's more like, for example, when you talk about Middle East, there are powers who wants to probably lead the Middle East world, the Islamic world. So when probably we can say that, okay, one block is Saudi Arabia and allies, and then other side is Iran and its proxies. And there is going to be friction between them. And there has been friction between them, which has directly impacted companies like us, not only us, but many, many companies. We saw the friction happening, and due to this, they were bombing in Yemen in Houthi rebels, and then Houthi rebels firing missiles and drones in Saudi Arabia, as well as Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Imagine, 2 years ago, I never thought I will train my people on how to react with the incoming missile in Dubai. I never thought I will do it, right? So, but we are doing it. That's how there's a friction happening on that front. There are also regional frictions happening in, for example, Asia Pacific. We know China versus, you have Southeast Asia versus Philippines, Japan, etc. So that friction is also happening. Out of these two blocks of friction, regional and global, it's resulting into, I will call, kind of belt of insecurity. There are a lot of countries where there's no government, there is no governance. And people could easily be hired as mercenaries. For example, you talk about Libya, Syria, Yemen, all these countries are the outcome of this friction, right? Now, these people can be hired, and you can pump them, you can send them to Europe to create nuisance, you can send them other places as well, which is again creating a little more chaos on that front. Nonetheless, we have been impacted, and we will probably continue to be impacted, because after all, when you look at from the psychology perspective, these conflicts have been there for past several centuries, not only decades, but several centuries. They were earlier regional level, because now it's a globally connected world. People can move any part of the world within 24 hours. So the scale has increased for past centuries. Now it's becoming more global and global. What is going to happen in future? I think, given the fact, the underlying fact, it's driven by two things, which I probably can classify. One is, I want more. Second is, my way is the only right way. And we will probably continue to have this true driving principle. Maybe there will be less in the weaning away of, I want more, but my way is the only right way is going to continue. And unless this doesn't go away, we will continue to see this happening for next several decades, maybe another century as well. So probably I finished my 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, and well done. So I think we're done with round one. I always feel a great sense of relief when we're done with round one in time. So we have, for a time check, we have about 14 minutes left. So we'll leave probably, I don't think we'll have too much time for questions, the audience questions, but we'll probably go for a second round. We can have one question to each of the panelists, and if you would request you to keep it to 1.5 minutes, your remarks. And then we'll have probably 20 to 30 seconds for a sound bite. So I'll go quickly. I'll keep my questions brief. You keep your answers brief, please. Bruce, how do you think the China-Taiwan situation will evolve? Is the war inevitable? Will the US intervene? Simple question, direct answer.
So the simple question would be, who's in charge when that happens? Right now, China is back on its heels economically. They have no interest in damaging Taiwan or getting into a tiff with the US right now. So they have patience. The Chinese have always had patience. I think they'll continue to, Taiwan will persist and China will continue to pester. And I think we'll see that occur for, whatever it takes for China to feel that they are prepared for action, where they can counter US sanctions and intervention, where they have, ideally, if Putin can secure a land bridge by annexing some land from Ukraine, they'll be very happy to have a land bridge to the Black Sea, and that'll give them an alternative resiliency from the Blue Ocean. So that's where I think it'll be. It'll just be a stalemate for significant period of time ahead.
Cyprian, the land bridge you talked about. Romania sits in the heart of Europe. You share a long border with Ukraine. You're close to Black Sea. You're close to Bosphorus, which is the gateway to Black Sea. Turkey is the custodian. Events in Israel, Middle East are also impacting Europe. So can you just explain to us significance of all of it, as is, evident from your place, as is visible from your place?
Yes, actually, the Black Sea area I do consider as being the beating heart of Eurasian geostrategic framework. And this is not only because Russia in the north part of the Black Sea and Turkey in the south part of the Black Sea are present, but also NATO through Romania and Bulgaria, we are present at the Black Sea. We consider if the things evolve in a type of political fracture war environment, a security threat to all the Europe, what's happening to the Black Sea. And this is now happening. And as we can see, since the Russia invaded the Crimean Peninsula, the things in the Black Sea are not very okay from the security point of view. And now as the war between Ukraine and Russia is still ongoing, and I do not see a stop of this war under any circumstances in this moment, this area will be remaining one of the hotspots in the geostrategy environment of the world. So Black Sea area is very important for all the countries. You must know that also China has a lot of interests in this area. And of course, their interests are mainly economic ones. But there is also another state which is opposite to the, let's call so the collective West, as the Russians like to say, is opposite to us. It's Iran, and they also have interests on energy sector in the Black Sea. So Black Sea is a kind of meeting point of the interest between Europe, between NATO, between Russia, and between Middle East and East Asia.
Love that Black Sea beating heart of Eurasian geostrategic heartbeat. Love it. Nicholas, so the rise of China is well documented, but the rise of middle powers, Saudi, UAE, Turkey, India, Indonesia, Mexico and BRICS Plus is less talked about. And then second theme is, dollar is the last surviving superpower of the US. So our concerns on de-dollarization overstated. If you can pick up these two themes in about a minute and a half.
Sure. I think it is definitely the time of middle powers. I think Irina and Bruce, they mentioned that several times, the fact that the US is retreating, the fact that Europe is completely at a loss in terms of how to maintain its influence wherever it still had a little bit of influence. We saw that last summer in Africa. So it's definitely by default, I would say, the time for middle powers. I mean, when you look at what Turkey has been doing in Africa, I mean, it is basically a lesson that they are teaching to everyone that, where there is a will, there is a way in terms of national influence. I was in Istanbul not so long ago attending a Turkey Africa Economic and Business Forum, and I was amazed by what I saw. The number of Turkish companies, and by the way, the business was being done in French. Turkish business people doing business with Africans in French and capitalizing on the retreat of French influence. It was a thing of beauty to watch. So definitely, middle powers have it is their time. The question now on de-dollarization, I mean, there is appetite for it. There is a lot of demand for it, definitely connected with the sanction regimes that Europe keeps slapping on absolutely everyone they have a disagreement with. The problem is that macroeconomically speaking, is going to take a long time. I mean, central banks have to pile up foreign reserves to finance international trade in other currencies. So it's going to take time. But I do think that any small step, as small as they may be, towards de-dollarization is a victory for the so-called global south and for middle powers.
Thank you. Thank you. So we agree about you. I mean, Dr. Cyprian, Farah, and me, we were in Turkey not so long ago for a global conference, and we kind of concur with your views, and they're doing it very smartly. And that time they had got 500 CEOs across the globe in a small, 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, and in a place called Gaziantep, which is like very close to Syria border, and which was devastated by earthquake. So I completely, I'm sure Cyprian and Farah are also nodding, so we completely concur with you. Pramod, you very eloquently explained the adverse outcome of global and regional friction on businesses. So as a security leader in a hemispherical role, how do you prepare for the various contingencies? And how do you deal with the crisis as it unfolds? 90 seconds.
Sure, thank you. I think we already saw when there was a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and there was names of the company were figured out, and it was there all over. And many companies were direct attack of cyber attacks, for example. As I say,
just one second. I'm tempted to ask you now, when you go to tell people, look, you may be attacked by Russia in Ukraine, tell them, do they believe you? Or is there a pushback from business guys? I'm just tempted to ask, we see a lot of pushback when we tell anybody that this bad thing is, I mean, there's just absolute denial. So just very quickly, your quick thoughts. I mean,
So from the cyber attack side, of course, we all dealt with this issues, not only one company, but multiple companies, and nobody knows where the cyber attacks are coming from. It's very difficult to track. However, on the people part, we were definitely preparing for it. And I know most of the forecasts were proved to be wrong. I think what happened at the end of the day was the worst case scenario came into life, and we were in a tussle where we have operation in Russia and we have operation in Ukraine as well. So imagine you're handling both sides of of the people and going through their emotions and their multiple. So it was quite tough, but fortunately we have been able to manage, and all employees are safe. We have 30 more seconds. So on the other side, I say wars are going to be there, and these conflict will be there. Only thing is the ways and means have changed. And then these ways and means, like we talked about, weaponization of artificial intelligence, cyber attacks, this will increase the intensity of the conflict. And this is where it's going to impact our companies as well, most of the companies, because we depend on technology, right? So that will be a one impact. The last thing is about, there will be tussle about what is good for the world, unipolar, multipolar, bipolar. So there is going to be everlasting conflict on these subjects.
So thank you for summarizing it so well and for the candid conversation. Burgess, are breaches inevitable? Would resilience be the key? Where are CIOs and CISOs spending the money?
Thank you. So as we mentioned, AI for cyber, cyber for AI, ESG. So firstly, where CIOs are spending the money is getting the right skills for the job, getting the right person, right man, right person for the job, for the right skill. So money and revenue follows good skills. So that's one area, whether it's vCISO, virtual CISO, or DPO, or data protection officer service. That's one area. CIOs are realizing they can't do it all by oneself. One person as a CISO or a CIO is not sufficient. You need to have skills on burstable capacity. So the virtual CISO, the DPO as a service is clearly expanding. We've seen that. As 0 days vulnerabilities coming up, and earlier it was weeks after they were attacked, now it's hours. I've seen one company attacked in 6 hours. So automated tools like ASM, attack surface area management tools, which quickly tell you your vulnerability exposures to a 0 day once it gets declared, where the patch comes out and that the window of opportunity is less. Those tools, again, CISOs are spending there. We mentioned on the NIST framework, earlier it was identify, protect, detect, where money was going in. Now it's respond and recover. So the next generation SOC, BAS tools, which are the breach, attack, and solution tools, that's one more area where CIOs are spending money. And next is defining and designing the network for the future, ZTA, Zero Trust Networks, again, a framework spoken loosely, but money is coming in there to design the next generation framework. So the 5 areas I mentioned: right skills, virtual CISO, DPO, cloud-based, BAS and advanced next-gen SOC tools, ZTA, and ASM and BAS tools. So back to you.
So love that, Burgess. Each time you come, you talk less about technology and more about people. So love that money and revenue follow good skills. So Farah, will come to you. Quick 30-40 seconds, maybe a minute, and anything which we have left out. And Irina, I'll just tell you the question so that you can. Did we learn any lessons from the pandemic? How to prepare for unexpected? Will we have something like this? And how do you protect the reputation of your businesses? I mean, we have with so much disinformation and all. So 2 themes for you and 1 quick remark and 1 or 2 quick remarks from Farah. That's all we have time for. So Farah, first you go.
Something interesting you said to Burgess about humans and tech. Let's talk about Elon Musk, who's now put a chip in a human brain. So that's interesting times ahead of what awaits us in the future. But I'd like to talk about the Commonwealth. Commonwealth obviously is very important, and the UK agenda should be moving more towards the Commonwealth. Zimbabwe is trying to get its membership back, and it's looking for support with other Commonwealth nations. So that would be interesting to see how the Commonwealth does play out. Obviously, we now have King Charles, and he's obviously following the legacy of our late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So it should be interesting dynamics to see who will be leaving, the UK. Like, there's many countries such as Jamaica, Australia, they're already talking about having elections. They don't want to be part of this great nation that we have. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the future between the UK and obviously the 52 heads of state that we do represent.
Thank you. Thank you, Irina. Your 1 minute.
Very quickly, from the pandemic, we've learned all the wrong lessons. The supply chain issues have not been secured. There has been no effort to harmonize the concerns regarding the handling of future pandemics and emergencies in terms of border issues, lockdowns, and other emergency measures, and the actors responsible for disinformation for the cover-up of the pandemic including specifically China, have not been held accountable, which makes a future event of some sort almost inevitable. Regarding reputation management, some of the private businesses and companies are already taking the measure of instrumentalizing proactive intelligence gathering as a way to protect against geopolitical threats. We are more likely to see more of that in the future. The one threat to guard in particular is weaponization of personal data gathered by apps such as TikTok and their variants, which allow for the greater personal design.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think we're out of time. So we'll just go to each of the, esteemed speakers. You get 20 seconds for a soundbite. So we'll start with Bruce.
Okay. I guess I'm going to step back. We're going to see a more competitive, more congested, more dangerous world. We need to have a global governance, international order established. Unfortunately, it's going to take a great shock to bring these powers together and make that happen. I don't know what that shock will be. And until then, rough waters ahead.
Thank you. Burgess. Cyprian.
Yes, I consider that we as leaders can be calm and just try to mitigate all the risks that we are facing, because in this world, which some are calling fragmented world, others are calling multipolar world, I consider that we will go towards a modular world, a model representing a group of countries with particular interest in a particular moment, and the structure of these models will be changing. And these models will be globally permanently negotiating between them. So all the leaders, we as leaders, will have to be involved with calm, I repeat, to try to mitigate all the risks and to go towards a stable global situation.
I hope we have one future mayor of London and a future prime minister of Romania on this panel. So quick, Burgess, do you want to kind of come in quickly with your 20-second soundbite? And then we go to Farah, Irina, Pramod, and Nicholas. Yeah, Burgess.
I'm good, thanks. Very well moderated. As I said, revenue for those people, the right skills are most important. The attacks are increasing. We've seen responsible AI come in as AI risk, as the top 5 risks coming in the world with cybersecurity, and with ESG coming in, privacy is a big focus.
Thank you. Farah.
Thank you.
Farah.
I think cyber warfare is something that should be feared, and it's something that it will unfortunately escalate conflicts. We need to also think about chemical warfare. Times have changed, and it can be the wild west. As Bruce said, if we do not get some order in place, things will escalate very quickly. Will Iran regime be broken down? Let's see. It's interesting to see what's happening right now in the region. It's obvious that the countries do want to remove that regime from Iran. So let's see what happens.
Thank you. Pramod?
Yeah, I think as clearly we know from all the panelists' view that these risks are going to continue. But from the perspective of global security, I think what is important now is follow the principle of security is everyone's responsibility. And we have seen this working out for us. We trained our management team in every country every year on crisis management. And we have seen successful crisis management by the country itself without having a full-time security resources in Ukraine, Israel, Turkey, you name it. It was successful because the business people were trained on handling it.
Prepare and prevent rather than repair and repent. So thank you, Irina.
Thank you so much. The greatest risk to businesses and to governments actually comes from internal vulnerabilities, meaning complacency, confirmation bias, and lack of preparedness.
Beware of insider threats. Yeah, insider threats. So thank you. And Nicholas, any quick 20 seconds?
Thank you. Thank you. I would say anticipate. Economic warfare will remain the name of the game. It's going to be a much more discrete type of economic warfare. weaponization of corporate interests will be absolutely terrible this year.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to the end of a fascinating discussion. Thank you, esteemed speakers. Thank you, dear participants. So speakers and experts, please reach out to the Q&A box, answer the remaining questions. There are just few remaining. Thank you, dear participants. Looking forward to the...
moderated.
Thank you, and looking forward to unveiling of Asia Risk Review, exciting keynotes, demos, and panels on APAC and technology. So back to you, Nikita, and sorry for overshooting by a couple of minutes.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to our esteemed panelists for such an amazing and comprehensive global risk outlook. And like we did touch upon a lot of risks, and in the present geopolitical landscape, I did learn a lot. I hope the audience did too. So moving quickly on to the unveiling of our Asia Pacific Risk Review 2024. It will be done by Shreya Talwar, a senior intelligence analyst with MitKat Advisory, which will be followed by a demo of the Data Surfer AI by Abhijit Korde, product manager at Data Surfer. Over to you, Shreya and Abhijit.
Thanks, Nikita. Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome once again to all those who've joined us today, and especially those who've joined us from different time zones. We really do appreciate your support. The symposium has commenced on an extremely powerful note with a strong keynote address by General Sharma and an extremely insightful panel discussion on what the global risk outlook for 2024 is going to look like. Taking this ahead, it gives me immense pleasure to unveil the Asia Pacific Risk Review 2024 on behalf of my team, which continues to be a flagship product of MitKat. The review starts with a message from our Honorable Chairman and goes on to provide you with a comprehensive overview of key risks across 5 categories that are anticipated to impact APAC countries in the year 2024. Whether it is political activity due to the upcoming general elections in several countries, natural disasters such as cyclone, typhoons, earthquakes, or cyberspace vulnerability. The Asia-Pacific region in itself is quite heterogeneous in nature, and each country has risks extremely peculiar to it. The report is extremely easy to read with graphical representation of important risks. The review includes and encapsulates major risks in each country, which is further followed by in-depth research to provide you with a strategic outlook of every country and its global positioning. The Asia Risk Review is an effort to understand and represent key risks and events across the APAC region through not only projections and forecasts for the coming year, but also includes notable risk events from 2023. Whether it was political or economic instability as seen in South Asian countries such as Bangladesh and Pakistan, or it was climate change impacting events seen in Australia and natural disaster events seen in Japan, and major cybersecurity risks are seen in Singapore. These were all covered and have been extensively analyzed in a succinct manner in this year's iteration of the ARR with implications on the near future. The ARR 2024 is available for download through the link provided in the chat box. The soft copy has a navigation panel on the left, which provides for a user-friendly and a very immersive reading experience. In case you require the hard copies of the Asia Pacific Risk Review 2024, please reach out to Sagar Bhanushali. His contact details are also available in the chat box.
So now we have our second panel for the day, APAC Risk and Resilience Outlook 2024, moderated by Mitesh Shah, the Asia Pacific Director of MitKat Global Consulting, and he's currently based in Singapore. His brief bio and LinkedIn profile are placed in the chat box. Mitesh, sir, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Nikita. It's an absolute honor, privilege, and pleasure to host the second panel for today. We are going to talk very specific about APAC risk outlook and what is in it for all the risk professionals that they have gathered today from the region. So good morning, good afternoon, depending upon the time zone that you are in. But we are in for a power-packed discussion because I have with me one of the few of the brightest minds in the industry, great thought leaders who have promoted not only security within their own organization, but within the entire community. In no particular order, allow me to introduce my panel to you guys. First, I have with us Tyne Van Amersfoort, Regional Security Director, Asia Pacific from Atkins Realis. Tyne is a very good friend from Hong Kong. Tyne is a seasoned professional with over 2 decades of extensive experience in operations, regulatory compliance, risk management, supply chain security, asset protection, travel risk management, and business resilience. His professional journey has taken him through diverse industries, including technology, supply chain management, and professional services in different countries and continents. This exposure has allowed Tyne to develop into a versatile and an adaptable expert, equipped with the skills to tackle challenging operational, regulatory, and leadership demands. His broad understanding of organizational backgrounds, cultures, and individuals further enhance his ability to excel in dynamic environments. Tyne is also part of the ACES Hong Kong chapter and is part of the managing committee. And he typically contributes a lot through social initiatives within the security industry in Hong Kong. Next, we have Morgan Dibble. Morgan Dibble is Director of Global Intelligence and Support, Marriott International. You heard it right. He's from the Marriott Group of Hotels. His bio is even more interesting. Morgan is the Director of Global Intelligence at Marriott International, where he leads a team of analysts who monitor threats to nearly 9,000 hotels. Yes, you heard it right, 9,000 hotels in over 140 countries and territories. I'm jealous, Morgan, with your profile. You know every hotel. I don't even know I would never be able to reach out to 9,000 in my lifetime. His team is responsible for setting the threat condition levels for every Marriott property operating overseas and inform the appropriate physical security countermeasures. Additionally, Morgan's team is responsible for threat notification, crisis management, compliance audits, travel safety, public-private sector intelligence relationships. Prior to joining Marriott, Morgan spent 8 years at the US Department of State Bureau of Diplomatic Security. Morgan received his master's in international studies from George Washington University and bachelor's degree in international affairs from University of North Carolina. Morgan, again, a dear friend from Singapore. We welcome you to this panel discussion. Danny is not only a good friend, but a mentor for me in Singapore. He has great experience in it. So let us introduce Danny Chan, Director, Regional Security Office from Asia Pacific MasterCard. An award-winning board member who is highly passionate, committed, experienced, and an individual that capitalizes on diverse civilian and military experience. His expertise include both in physical as well as cybersecurity, data protection, and running large-scale complex international security operations. He also has experience in business continuity, crisis management, investigation, and intelligence, amongst others. Before the stint in corporate, Danny was in the army as a captain with the Singapore Special Forces. Danny proceeded to develop and advise numerous law enforcement agencies and military tactical units around the world with the pretempt defense before serving in the Fortune 500 companies. Danny has been featured regularly in Channel News Asia, premier news channel in the region. Danny has also become the regional security director for Marriott International before his stint with MasterCard. Currently, Danny sits on the ACES International's Global Board of Directors, the Advisory Council of Harvard Business Review, a US ASEAN Business Council Cybersecurity Subcommittee, and the Counterterrorism Certification Board. Danny is also the chair of FS ISAC CISO Congress and sits on their Asia Pacific Strategy Committee. In his free time, Danny volunteers as an associate mediator with the Singapore Mediation Center and small claims tribunals at these subordinate courts of Singapore. And he also runs his own micro-social initiative called Making a Difference. Welcome, Danny, to this panel. We are enriched by your presence. Next, we have Julian Tan. Julian Tan is the global head of physical security operations at Dyson. He is an accomplished security professional with an extensive track record of over 2 decades in the field of security and safety operations. His key responsibilities have consistently revolved around managing critical relationships with regulatory and government agencies. He specializes in the development of robust risk mitigation strategies specifically tailored to address imminent threat scenarios. Previously, he has worked with Grab, Amazon Web Services, X, which is former Twitter, SRS, and International SOS. His expertise extends to the creation and implementation of comprehensive policies and procedures encompassing essential areas as vendor management, crisis management, and oversighting supply chain security and resilience. Thank you, Julian, for being part of this panel discussion. We are humbled by your presence. Jimmy. Next, and we have Jimmy Palmieri, a highly experienced security professional from Japan with a firm called Vector Risk Management. From 2005 to 2022, Jimmy contributed significantly to the Gendarmerie Nationale. I had actually Googled it how to pronounce this because I'm not good in French. Between 21 and 22, he worked as an investigator engaging in criminal investigations, police operations, and crime preventions. He played a crucial role with the security division at the French embassy in Japan. His responsibilities included overseeing security at the embassy, the ambassador's residence, the Consulate General of France in Kyoto, but generally as the ambassador's advisor regarding all matters of risk and security for French citizens in Japan. Moving back in time, from 2008 to 2017, Jimmy served in the anti-riot squadron, Gendarmerie Mobile. In his capacity, he has handled general security, crowd control and tactics, disaster response, crime prevention, and investigations. With this, we welcome all the panelists to this interesting forum wherein we would like to have your inputs for the Asia Pacific risk outlook. Okay, let's begin with Danny. Danny, the first question is for all panel members to set the tone. Specifically to your own organizations, how do you foresee, or what are the key threats in APAC that you foresee that will consume your time, effort, and energy in 2024? And what are some tips that you can give to the associate companies that are joined, or the members that have joined from different companies, how do they can manage it better? First, we'll go with Danny, and then I'll take it. I would request each panel to take about 3 minutes on this one, so that we are sticking 3 to 4 minutes on this topic. Danny.
Yeah, thanks, Mitesh, because I feel that we are in this wake of global dislocation, right? That's obviously caused by, the pandemic. We've seen the conflict in Eastern Europe and now the conflict in Middle East, not to mention the rising cost of living, right? Threats from new technology and this general intensification of contests between great nations, right? So terms like polycrisis, a term that has been, I guess, curated by social scientists back in the 1990s to describe this overlapping and interwoven crisis that impacts humanity, right? So unfortunately, it doesn't matter whether you're sitting in Singapore, London or Pune, right? Unfortunately, all of us are in this sort of operating environment, and that's why I think it's important for us to take time out, right? Even just a little time like today to come together to share what is top of mind and what we can collectively do about it, so that we can better calibrate and harmonize our response, so that we can collectively not just protect our organization, right, but also the whole ecosystem. And with that, Mitesh, thank you for your invitation. It's really happy to see friends like Tyne, Julian and Morgan, on the panel, right? Thanks, Mitesh.
Thank you. Next, I'll go to Morgan. Morgan, what are your thoughts? What is going to keep you busy at night in 2024?
Sure. Thanks, Mitesh, and thanks again for this opportunity. I'm going to cheat a little bit on this question. As Mitesh mentioned, I'm actually serving in a global role, so maybe I can add a little perspective on that. And I think paradoxically, one of the challenges for us who are based in Asia Pacific is all of the distractions from other parts of the world. So many of us roll up to leaders who are based in the US or in Europe or outside of Asia. And so this year in particular, as Danny mentioned, we're competing with Israel, Hamas, with Ukraine, Russia, with the Paris Olympics, and also with the US elections in November. So we want to remain novel in what we're presenting and not sound like, the 2010 greatest hits where we're talking about North Korea, the South China Seas, natural disasters, terrorism, and elections all over again, right? So to that end, we're trying to use more data-driven metrics that demonstrate the scale and influence of the APAC region. rather than say, all right, you guys are dealing with the conventional security risks, but we're more distracted by these flashy new things in other parts of the world. I think the next thing, obviously, this is going to come up from the other panelists, and not to steal their thunder, but we are tracking many elections around the world, but particularly in Asia Pacific, Taiwan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, India. I think everybody's seen the statistics that this year there'll be more than 50 national elections, and that about half of the world's global population will be participating in these. But I think what's interesting to me about elections is not necessarily people going to the polls or contested outcomes. It's just the communications technology and how it exists now, right? So if we were having this conversation 10, 15 years ago, it would be very different. Now in the region, we have over 1 billion social media users who actually have an active voice in the conversation. And whether that democratizes the process or not can be debated. But I think now what we're seeing is this cycle in which we have seen authorities, regardless of the context, right, leveraging these religious, nationalist, or xenophobic sentiment to win over public support. And that in turn sort of polarizes global publics who may demand more extreme or at least less mainstream policies out of them. And so we're playing catch up with this a little bit as well. I think to that point, we've, as a hospitality company, we have to be very careful, as I'm sure other organizations do as well. We are hosting a wide array of guests with different ideologies, different religions and backgrounds. And so we're going to be careful about not being put in a position where we have to take a stance. Who do we support or not? And then sometimes that's increasingly difficult. And then last, if I have one more second, it would be on sort of cyclical terrorism trends. And I know that it's been, fortunately, relatively quiet for the most part in the region in recent years, which is a good thing. But I would just highlight that this, as we all know, is cyclical, right? So just historically, after Al-Qaeda, we saw Jamaat Islamiyah and Abu Sayyaf pop up. Then after ISIS, we saw militant splinter cells claiming allegiance in a Southeast Asia caliphate. But there's always a lag, and it's a few years later. So what I'm tracking, and it may not be 2024, is if what's happening in Israel-Hamas, or as I mentioned with some of this sort of nationalist sentiment, if there is a brewing undercurrent of violent extremism that may not yet manifest. And so not to rest on our laurels and say, oh, great, Indonesia didn't see a major terrorist attack at all last year, we're in the clear. But these things sometimes take time to catch up. So those would be some of the things that we're tracking on our in Marriott. Thanks.
Thank you, Morgan. I think I like your two things, which I'll catch up later: data-driven metrics and the trends on cyclic terrorism. This is something which companies tend to lower their guard when things are not going all right. This happens a lot with larger organizations. It's always reactive in nature rather than proactive. So thank you for that. Next, I'll move to Julian Tan. Hi, Julian. What are some of the trends that you foresee in 2024 that will keep you busy in your organization?
First, thanks, Mitesh, and thanks to the wonderful panel here. I wouldn't say it's trends, but what I want to just highlight is I think we're in a rather strange era right now where you've got, just like what Danny was mentioning after the pandemic, now you've got all this technology disruption, you have all these wars and all that. But actually, if you look back in history, this shift has happened many times. An era of change has happened many times. And when I bring the context specific to Asia Pacific region, all this have pushed, and generally this push is bringing Asia to light again. So that means Asia will be at the forefront of businesses, right? You would see a lot more set up in this part of the world. Is that a good or bad thing? Well, we have to wait and see, right? But that also then means, like to Morgan's point, is you see a lot of risk. You require now a lot more support, intel, understanding the business climate and what it looks like, right? Specifically for the Asia Pacific region. Now, as I sit in a more of a global role, apart from just the Asia Pacific region, we look at a lot of the geopolitical impact that it has on a particular business like ours, whether it's direct or indirect. All this makes up to how a business survives in an era like that. So end day, I would say that I wouldn't say there is a specific trend, but I would say that where the business or where businesses are now pushing it to. So it's like India, right? India's probably one of the next giants to emerge, apart from now where manufacturing hubs are going to be relocated to. So in short, I think Danny, Morgan have already mentioned quite a lot of stuff. Again, it's just an era of change that I think for us security, we also have to evolve with it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, keeping pace with constantly changing environment is our job, and I think it is not going to change. You just have the acceptability of this era of change is what going to define how your role shapes up in the future. Thank you for that, Julian. Next, let's go to Tyne. Tyne, welcome to the panel. What are your thoughts? Because you are in a very interesting vertical. You can take a minute to explain what Atkins Realist does, so that the entire team has also a posture about it. Thank you.
Yeah, to put things, I mean, bring it a little bit closer to home in India, your nuclear fleet is something my company, before actually we bought that technology, the CANDU technology, has been building their nuclear power plants on, right? So now with the refurbishment, hopefully they come back to us that we can upgrade them to more powerful, more efficient nuclear reactors. But that's a tiny part of the business we do. Our core business is really engineering services. So that comes from basic designs, detailed designs, environmental studies, etc. And a lot of that is done from India, from our global technology centers, which are spread out across the country. So back to the question raised there. So what are the challenges? I would say it's more of a continuous focus on certain topics. I mean, we already heard the geopolitical challenges, and there's more on that later, right? We heard cyber, but also cyber related in our industry, for example, cyber espionage is a challenge, especially, when you're working on either certain projects or having certain technologies. Ransomware, because that's obviously also with an eye on business resilience. It would disrupt our business if it would be impacted by a ransomware attack. But also, and we heard it earlier in the sessions, AI crafted scams or fake news. And with that fake news is also dealing with biases and just intelligence. It's for intelligence providers already a really tough job to stay on top of things, verify facts, etc. Because nowadays everyone is a journalist himself, right? You see something, you post it on social media. And that's also something which senior management sees. So they are sometimes ahead of us and asking questions. Luckily, we are aware because we usually have the same channels for monitoring. But to get it confirmed by intelligence providers, then to reach out on the ground to people, and then also think through the consequential impacts. A very quick example would be like we're working on a very big project in Guinea where there was an explosion at a oil refinery. But consequently, because we're working in the jungle where all the electricity comes from generators, people were immediately going into crisis mode, shut down equipment just to make sure that we save the fuel, because we did not know how long the impact would be until the next shipment of diesel would arrive. So linked to that, travel security is ongoing, because people will travel to all parts of the world, especially in our business, to very remote areas for projects for the World Bank, for example, or the European Investment Bank, just to do good. But if you're in developing countries, it's a challenge for us to keep track of our colleagues and make sure that we have the appropriate response should there be a need of assistance, which is mostly medical, to be very honest, to a lesser extent security. And what also was shared by, I think Danny brought it up, right? Mental wellness, that's a serious challenge also, which could be brought into the workplace. If someone has struggles, it could turn some people into some showing behavior which we would not expect in an office. So workplace violence related instance is something we keep monitoring. And as lastly, I would like to quickly mention, it's again an ongoing focus. It's the generation gap we have. We have a very young workforce, a lot of young engineers, but to really make sure that we keep them focused and engaged, you also have to change the way how you're delivering your training content. I mean, I don't want to call it the TikTok or the YouTube Shorts generation, but bottom line is they are, right? So we have to make sure that we keep those messages very short and concise, bite-sized videos instead of a 45-minute education session, which they do not appreciate. So I think that's it for now. I think there's more to come later, right? So
thanks, Stein. I think, yeah, but I think a couple of things which I will just say that you're right, that the cybersecurity threats are on the rise and which will be keeping rising, so that you have highlighted more about AI, crafted, both the news as well as fake news that will also be something in the fray. Mental wellness is again a point which has increased. More and more organizations are now having focus teams or develop teams to focus on this aspect of mental wellness. And lastly, I think interestingly, I've never heard this point, but you are right. A generational gap between people. You have your experts, your high-level project management and team members, as well as the young workforce who are working as engineers. How do they collaborate and work? So we need to cater to that aspect as well. Thank you, Tyne, for that insights. Lastly, let me come to Jimmy. Jimmy, thanks for being on the panel. We would love to hear your thoughts. Initially, you consult a number of organizations, and with your rich experience, what are the threats that companies are coming to you and asking about support, in Japan or in the region generally?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mitesh, and thank you everyone for attending. So we are facing a lot of big challenges in Japan, particularly, and maybe all of you have witnessed that we started the year like a firework with the big earthquakes that happened in the northwest Japan. So that's a problem we are well aware of, and all the companies and business here are well prepared with evacuation routes and plans and emergency plans. So that's the first point. But yeah, going back to what I just said before, so the generation gap is also a big deal here, because we have a population that really aging here with a lack of skills in many fields, including security, because the awareness in Japan, the awareness about security in Japan is really, really low. But in the same time, the young generation spending time on social media and hyper connected actually shows that there is a lack of once again awareness and security, and a leakage of data and what they share about with everyone, which they don't aware of, and which is a really, really big challenge in cybersecurity threats in Japan specifically, but probably around APAC as well. And then probably the last point, is once again, I'm staying on my country. Sorry about that, but what we see is there's a strong culture of safety in Japan. But what we have seen is, because of all the concerns that have been true worldwide about economy and wars and everything. So what's happening here is, like we have seen for a long time now, but crime is rising. Crime is rising a lot, and the population is not prepared for that.
Okay.
So definitely we'll have a lot of challenges to face this year.
I mean, interesting to hear thoughts on that. When we have different dynamics of age groups playing around in Japan, I was expecting that to turn with sometime, rise in crime. Okay. Now, let's move to the second part of our panel discussion, where we have very much focused questions for each panelist based on their experience. And again, I'll start with Danny. So Danny, I know I've met you many times, and you are a big propagandist, if I can say, for convergence on cyber and physical security, right? I know you have a cyber fusion center, something like that in MasterCard as well. So how do you foresee take up on convergence of cyber and physical security in our APAC market to begin with? Okay, because you speak and interact with a number of thought leaders in this region. And what are generally good takeaway points for any of to our audience today? If they want to start on this journey on the convergence of cyber and physical, what are the 2-3 things that they should initiate, so that at least they can begin this journey, the long journey of convergence between cyber and physical? So Danny, over to you for thoughts.
Mitesh, I think that's a really good question. But I don't think that, you know, the physical and the cyber security convergence is coming.
Okay.
It is already here. So besides my company, there are a series of companies, you know, operating here in Asia that has converged, you know, both cyber and physical security into one department, right? Collapsed it into one department. And the problem is that, unfortunately, these days, people still put in these two buckets of, you know, security, be it either physical or cyber. And unfortunately, if you look at the all hazards dashboard, collectively we face a lot more threats besides, you know, physical or cyber, right? Things like compliance, for example, you know, regulatory compliance, contractual compliance is a big issue for us. Okay, and I would argue probably for most companies, things like data protection, you know, data privacy laws, you know, which one of us are not impacted by that, right? More and more regulators are clamping down on what that requirements mean. And unfortunately, right, you know, what the regulator wants in Singapore, for example, is very different from one, you know, across, you know, in Malaysia or Indonesia, right? The threshold for breach is very different. The threshold for reporting is also very different, right? So is anyone looking at that? And that may not necessarily fall under your traditional, you know, cyber or physical buckets. And what about operational resilience, right? More and more markets, even our regulator here in Singapore, is regulating operational resilience, right? So how many of us are actually looking at that? So unless you have a dashboard that is all hazards, you don't have the ability to look into your operating environment and understand the threats that you are actually facing or your organization is actually facing. But I think what's worse these days, I think we really need to go back to the basics, right? We need to look at risk management 101. For example, let's just, you know, by a show of hands, right? How many of us have taken our yearly influenza jab? Right? If you have not, for the last 30 years, right, 500,000 people have been dying from influenza, right? So if you have not taken influenza jab, don't worry about cyber threats. Don't worry about physical threat, right? Go into your nearest, you know, travel clinic and get a jab first, right? And again, risk management 101. Depending on the city you're in, like Singapore is something like 3 out of 1,000. Unfortunately, in cities like Bombay, right, it's 55 out of 1,000 of people who die from road traffic accident, right? So before you cross the road, make sure you know you look to the left and right, you know, so simple things like that. I think that we've been asked on too many of these panels, right? You know, what is the latest skill? You know, what is sexy? What is advanced and all that? But unfortunately, people are not able to get the basic stuff done right, right? And I would personally argue if you have not done the basic right, don't worry about, you know, what's coming over the horizon in 2024, you know, what's the best hits of 2023. Don't worry about that, right? Risk management 101, worry about the big things first. Right. Thanks, Mitesh. Back to you.
Thank you. That's a great takeaway. You know, you need to go back and focus on what is the primary things that will prevent you both on personal and at an organizational front before you go at the high level AI things. Thank you for that. Let me go to, let's take Morgan, next question for you. Morgan, you have a very diverse portfolio and a region to cover. And based on the industry that you are, hospitality, the socio-economic risk in each of those countries that you operate in are different. So how do you manage this security challenges in each region that you operate? And you can cite your example considering your rich experience in the region and segment that you operate in.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Mitesh. I'd start by saying how threat assessments are done, not at Marriott necessarily, but writ large. And I think as much as we would like to say that they're well-informed and objective, my experience, and not just at Marriott, is that it's often driven by very colorful anecdotes and personalities as much as it is objective, consistent, and global data. So what we're doing now is creating a framework where we can look at all regions around the world, all 140 countries and territories in which we operate, based on standard data sets, which also goes through a qualitative review, but to move away from anecdote or personality-driven security, right? And so when I talk to my colleagues in the US and they say, wow, you know, San Francisco is is really dangerous these days. And so would you rather be there or in Haiti, Port-au-Prince, Haiti? Oh, no, it's not that bad, you know? So we have to look at this as a broader continuum of global security, and that includes Asia as well, right? And so for those that are based in the US saying, well, Asia is just, it's far out there and I'm not as familiar with it, and it could sound like a scary place. But when we're able to present that compelling data, I think it helps us align across a global sort of continuum there. So that's one, if we can look at objective data sets and metrics. The second would be sort of localized security or understanding of the local operating environment. And what I mean by that is our company, hospitality in general, we want to create the ideal guest experience. We want to have open doors. We want everyone to create memories, right? We don't want a bouncer at the door who's frisking people. We don't have the luxury of being an airport or a diplomatic facility where we say security comes first. Absolutely, it is our top priority, but we have to reconcile that with you want to walk carefree into a hotel, right? And it's unlike maybe some other corporate facilities where you have badge access, you have restricted access, elevator access. No, it's your doors are wide open. And so what we also have to do is reconcile what the local expectations are. Now, we're not going to sacrifice security to make people comfortable, but you know, it's been my experience, for example, in parts of South Asia, security is seen as sort of an additional amenity or a luxury, and it conveys this sense of sort of prestige. And you want to go to a place where you know that you're within the secured barrier. You can go to parts of Europe where they'll say, absolutely no security on me. I want to walk right into those doors. I don't want anybody to talk to me and everything. So you have to understand how to modify that operational security based on the local operating environment. And that's something that we work closely with our intelligence or our operations counterparts on as well. And then again, just trying to move away from people within the industry that have been here for, 20, 30 years and remember specific anecdotes. Obviously, the early 2000s for us in Asia, as Danny well knows, right? Whether it's Bali bombings, Jakarta bombings, Mumbai 2008, and that's left a lasting impression with people, especially if they're not living and working in the region. And I think moving away from that, I mean, if you ask an American, are you sure you're going to go to New York City? Because you remember 9/11, right? Yeah, what are you talking about? That doesn't even register as, transnational terrorist threat. And I realize it's of a different character, right? And there are these entrenched or endemic factors, but I think we need to evolve with the changing security situation, and then also apply a comprehensive and consistent framework, even if we do account on the operational side for local practices, behaviors, et cetera. I mentioned in my opening remarks, right? Phenomenal year for Indonesia, not having a single reported extremist attack. Still, I think some would say, well, and maybe for reason, but saying that they should have an elevated security posture. Meanwhile, we see the number of attacks, increasing number of extremist attacks in parts of Europe, in France and Germany over the last year in particular. And how do we talk to people based in the US or based globally and say, listen, we need to consider that as well. We can't just have these inherent biases that you think this is naturally safer than the other place because of a long history. But I mean, there are factors to consider as well, right? But I think that's part of it as well, is sort of just eliminating those subjective biases and using more objective data and metrics where we can to make a more compelling case.
Oh, thank you, Morgan. I think I like the idea that this industry has not been a data-driven industry for a long time. Last 3 to 5 years, we are seeing a trend where data-driven metrics have been used by organizations to make much more informed decisions. They are not going by gut feel or by perceptions, because it was a much more a perceptive kind of industry. What the cultural or the regional security guy feels, he would put security controls according. So great points there. I'll come back for more thoughts later. But let's move to Julian. Julian, I know you are with Dyson and one of the larger players in the segment of personal products. You deal with a lot of diverse suppliers, and you have a lot of dependency with different suppliers in and around the region. How does an organization of your scale get the entire vendor management or vendors and suppliers in the enterprise managed program of Dyson in a way? Because you are working with a lot of diverse kind of suppliers, as well as their dependency is much higher with suppliers.
Yeah, thanks, Mitesh. I was looking at this question long and hard because it's interesting. because first there's dependency on suppliers, which is, I can tell you, we will always be dependent on suppliers, right? For fact, because you need your perishables, it needs to sail, it needs to fly, you need all that. And then comes the part of the wider resilience. Um, and what I've noticed is that resilience means very differently to different organizations. So I'll just talk specifically from a Dyson standpoint. Um, Dyson is not a very mature company, as like most of our panel speakers here. And so when we look at our whole flow of operations that we have our own manufacturing hubs. We have our contract manufacturers. We have our logistic suppliers. We have our customs warehouses. Your retail shops, and how that one unit, that product lands on a customer's hands. So we look at it as a whole. Now, when we look at resilience, we now look at collaboration. How do we better collaborate with our suppliers? And then when you start to segment it up, it becomes, we do a lot of audits. And every audit, I can tell you this for sure, every supplier they have audited, they have come out tops. They have come out 100%. But when we do unannounced audits, recently there was a case, unannounced audits, this is what happened. In a particular country, in a particular region, juvenile workers who are not supposed to be are there, right? We caught them, and they were going like, oh, sorry, we didn't know that they were juvenile, so on and so forth. All. So then we have to then relook at how we now execute our audits. It's very different. So what we've done now is we've looked at training, we've looked at certifications that we now put a standard across, and we look at from a cyber, we look at information. So when we put this whole thing together, it becomes more of a holistic approach. In the past, physical security would do their own audits, cyber their own audits, information, and it never came a point where we did piece all this information up, right? But now what we're doing is we're trying to do all that, and then it tells a bigger story. It provides us better risk mitigation plans, and it allows us now to use that data now to actually zoom in into a lot of stuff. We can now better manage our contractual obligations with our suppliers. We're in a better position now to tell, look, we want to work with you. Let's have a resilience training, exercise, testing, whatever we want to call it. Let's do that. And I think last but not least is this. At the end of the day, this resilience piece from a Dyson standpoint, it's always about people. It is the people that make the program work. It is people that drive your security programs. It is that. So when you put a program in there, I can do it one way, Danny can do it one way, Morgan can do it another way. But if you have that alignment, everybody goes in, it creates consistency, it creates better alignment, and that's how you build a more kind of a robust resilience program. Thanks.
Thanks, Julian. Just to follow up on that. So, do you believe? Okay, we as an organization are seeing that more and more organizations are getting the supplies included in their yearly simulation exercises and those programs. Are you doing something of that, or this is something that you are seeing a trend that is happening around?
It is not, because I think there are. I think the challenge here again falls onto the relationship contractually with a supplier. So unless we can breach that, it makes it a lot easier.
Okay, perfect. And well said. I think with vendor management, it is more about what is it in the contract that finally decides what can you do with them. Even audits, So I'm glad you could say you could do unannounced audit. Otherwise, most contracts they say that you have to give 1 month notice before an audit test to be done. Right, all of these things are there. So thanks, Julian. But I think amazing insights from your end. Let's move to Time now. I think Time. Again, you have folks in a number of geographies and running a number of projects. And with the constantly changing geopolitical dynamics in the region, how does an organization of your scale plan and manage their risk management strategies? I would love to hear some examples from your side. Is it different in different geographies? How do you do? And do you, try and tailor and tweak it more often? Or have you done it more recently? You're tweaking it more often than before. Your thoughts, Stein, on this one?
Sure, thanks for that question. I have some things from the current and also some examples from the past, but the current, it was earlier mentioned, right? Poly-crisis, perma-crisis. We move from one crisis into another, and some of them are interrelated, others are completely standalone. So we have a corporate risk register, right? And I don't know, there's like 220-ish different risks identified there, but the top 20, and they constantly come and go and move up and down, right? Do get board's attention. So those are being discussed. And currently out of the 20, 3 of them are with global security. So that's where we have to give frequent updates. And it could be if we say, okay, at the moment, we assess this risk as fully either transferred or mitigated, it could drop down on the risk register. So that's a very dynamic model there. But that's something which comes top down. So that's decided in Canada, or with this, we're a Canadian headquarter company, right? So with a team, the risk team, which luckily is also distributed around the globe. So it's not, that's a very Canadian only perspective. However, given that we have obviously a large portion of our corporate leadership sitting in Canada, they pick up certain intelligence or news pieces. So managing their perceptions and biases. And a recent example was this diplomatic rift between India and Canada, where India stopped issuing visas to Canadian passport holders globally, but it did not say anything about prohibiting Canadians who had already a visa issued to travel into India. But the company decided, and yes, I was consulted and asked, okay, what's your view on this? I said, it doesn't say anywhere that you cannot travel into Canada. You go to your network, you ask around other Canadian companies or security practitioners in your network just to understand how they are dealing with their Canadian nationals traveling. I said, oh, we had travelers going in, they're warmly welcomed. So dealing with those perceptions, and yeah, there was actually literally, it was not necessarily a travel ban, but you need to get board member approval to travel to Canada. And given that we have a global technology center there's a lot of Canadian travelers going back and forth because we manage large projects from Canada, also partially in India. So again, that's managing these perceptions and biases is a challenge, right? So what we do is that constant horizon scanning. We don't have crystal balls, but we have to look into try to look into the future. What could the impact be on? We have elections coming up, and the whole world is shaking about what's coming up in November, right? Because that does have big impacts for us. And related to that, and that was something. And that comes back to some of the examples from my past life. And I was at a logistics service provider where we had quite some Chinese companies who were fearing, and those sanctions were not even imposed yet, but they were fearing sanctions. So talking how they were actually looking into risk management and adopting also the geopolitical challenges there was that they started to request us to work with airlines to find routings from Asia, or mostly from China, to Latin America, bypassing US airspace. I can tell you that's pretty challenging, given that planes, especially if you want to have the perfect load factor, right? They usually don't fly that far. They need to make technical stops. And a very popular place to do a technical stop is Anchorage in Alaska, which is American territory. So anyway, we managed to work things out with some of the airline partners to make sure that we could adjust their routings. What we see happening now with the challenges or the constant attacks on vessels in the Middle East, the Red Sea, alternative routing, because of the other conflict we have where Russia is involved, right? Iran already being on a sanction list, many companies don't allow transiting of goods through Iran. Technically, your land bridge is disconnected because you have to pass either through Russia or Iran to make it from Asia to Europe.
So yeah, great. I think yeah, that great perspectives. I think I love the thought that you put. Questions from your leaderships could be very varied. It could be right from an Intel news they hear somewhere to suddenly a supplier doing something at a different end, and you are asked to completely change the route for that. So I mean, interesting perspectives. Thanks for citing some real life examples. Lastly, let me go to Jimmy. Jimmy, you being with a different organization and consulting in a consulting role, what are the new age threats that you're seeing that organizations are coming up for support and consultation truly in Japan, apart from the other things that are happening or have been happening for almost a decade? So over to you, Jimmy, for some insights on some new age threats that are keeping corporates busy and they in turn keeping you busy.
Well, thank you, Mitesh. Well, to rebound on Morgan's previous comments, so the thing is, who would have thought that the former prime minister would have been shot in the middle of a suburban area in Japan, in Tokyo? So that's something that sadly helped us push the awareness of security in Japan, and specifically in our company, since we are hiring a lot of different profiles from all over the world with our own experience, and bring back in Japan and try to push the awareness in global companies. And the global security that they are pushing to Japan, which sometimes is really difficult because they don't want to change from their local mindset. But what history and recent history has proved now is like they have to change, and it is going to change. Because we're facing with the geopolitical situation here is really particular. We have South Korea conflicts with North Korea. We have the China around. We are part of supported by America, which sometimes puts us in kind of a struggle, and the Russia and the North. So we're kind of a specific situation here, but that helps people really understand what security is, because there is a sense of super safety here.
Okay.
That people doesn't understand, and the thing is that now we have a crime rising, and people would have never thought about that in the past. So that put us, and then because of the safety image of Asia, so a lot of people from foreign overseas are coming more and more, and that raised the question about thinking about the future. About the Asia, APAC region. And that's pretty challenging, but it's kind of thrilling at the same time. So
Thank you for your thoughts. Okay, I'll ask the audience to take the opportunity to put their questions in Q&A. We already see one question for Julian, which I'll count. But we'll just take a quick round with everybody in the same order. Okay, so your thoughts in one line and a soundbite from each one of you to just give a summary kind of statement that the audience can take away today. I'll start with Danny. Danny.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess if we're going to give the audience a few takeaways, right? I think listening from the rest of the panelists really provide a very balanced view. But again, for me, it's really going back to the basics, right? I think we need to cover the basic stuff first. And how many of us have that risk register to understand where our risk is? And I really like what Morgan said about, taking this sort of like risk-based approach, having it being data-driven, right? Not personality-driven, or, I feel, I got, all this gut feeling is not going to help us. At the end of the day, if we're not able to provide the sort of like fact-based, data-based narrative to our executive to make the right decision, it's going to be a very long, arduous and lonely path up there. And that's why, going back to my opening, I think it's so important for us to come together, right, to share what's top of mind, because we all have blind spots, right? Until we sit down and I think Julian raised a couple of good points about how we should look at perhaps combining the different sorts of audits, right, and obviously conducting unannounced audit. Thanks for sharing that. So it's so important for us to get those takeaways, which I personally have, so that we can think of crafting a more mature, a more bespoke approach, right? And the important thing is, right, it doesn't matter how good this advice is. At the end of the day, we need to go back to our respective organization, right, and operationalize the lessons that was learned and shared. Because if you don't do that, no amount of information is going to change it, right? With that, Mitesh, back to you.
I like 2 points. I'll say, focus on risk management 101 and implement what you learn. Don't just keep it. Learning is good, but implementing what you learn is also important. Thanks for that. Next is Morgan. Morgan, a quick soundbite, something that you want to share that the audience can take away.
Sure. Thank you, Mitesh. Just 3 words, actually. Impact over activity. So this is a mantra that we use at Marriott Intelligence. We can spin our wheels all day long. We can work 12, 14-hour days. We can put out brilliant white papers that nobody would read sometimes, right? Or we can have a very meaningful infographic or a sound bite or touch the right person with the right intelligence, and it makes a significant impact. So I would just say, for all of us spinning our wheels out there, thinking that the time we put in necessarily equates to impact, we're really reviewing and revising how we measure and how we target impact over just the activity on a daily basis. That'd be my takeaway.
That's awesome, I must say. Impact over activity. It should be taken on a personal level as well. I'll take that learning from my side. Thank you so much. Next, Julian. Hi, Julian, I think. Julian, can you give us a quick soundbite on what is the takeaway that you would like the audience to go back with today? I think we'll come back to Julian. Let's go to Tyne.
Sure. When I was in university, and this is not going to be a long story, don't worry. I was taught one thing. It's like the only constant factor in life is change. And I think we can also tweak that a little bit. And I don't want to be the messenger of bad news, but hey, we're in resilience and in security, right? We normally have to think like the bad actor. So I would say the only constant factor nowadays in business is either crisis, disruption, or uncertainty. So adopt that mindset to make sure that you are prepared for the worst.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Jimmy, a quick one.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I would say, yeah, continuous and constant training and awareness about security all over the world and in APAC. And always look on the resilience and certainly share the experience and push the awareness of security around us is the best way to work together and have a safer place. Wasn't
I'll just try. Thank you. Julian, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can now. Sorry, there was a technical glitch a while ago.
No problem. A quick soundbite from your end.
Yeah. Mine just actually is going to be just simple. It's just in terms of strengthening security resilience, I think we should start doing that through proactive partnerships, whether internal or external, rigorous assessments, and that's going to be needed because that's where you find all the risks and the gaps, and then continuous collaboration. Again, whether it's external or internal. So that's pretty much how we strengthen resilience.
With that, thank you, panelists, Danny, Julian, Morgan, Tyne, Jimmy. It was fascinating and enriching to hear your thoughts. You truly are flag bearers of our security industry in the region. Please do contribute and stay in touch. I'll have only one line to say that we all plan, as security professionals, we all plan. It's time to plan practically. A lot of planning that I've seen on documentation does not work on ground. So that is one takeaway from my side. It's time for doing planning, but plan pragmatically is which will take us to new heights. On that note, thank you, and I'll hand over the dais back to Nikita. Thank you. Thank you, panelists.
Thank
It
you
was a pleasure.
so much, esteemed speakers and moderator, for such an amazing, thought-provoking and thorough discussion on the risk and resilience outlook for the ever-evolving Asia-Pacific region. So since we are on time and we could start early with our amazing keynote address, which will be delivered by Mr. Pranjal Sharma. So I have the honor to introduce him today. So an acknowledged thought leader, speaker, and author, founding executive editor at Bloomberg UTV, former advisor strategy to India's public service broadcaster, member of the Outstanding Speakers Bureau, and winner of several awards, including News Television Award for the Best Business Show. Pranjal Sharma is a well-known economic analyst who leads India's economic engagement with the world as well as public discourse at global and national platforms, including the World Economic Forum, St. Gallen Symposium, Horace's Global Meet, and IMA. He served as a member of the Global Agenda Council and World Economic Forum for 8 years, and is a very regular speaker and expert network at Davos. An author of several famous books on technology, globalization, and media, his recent bestseller, The Next New, Navigating the Fifth Industrial Revolution, is available globally. He is a columnist with Business Standard newspaper and Business World magazine, among other publications. Pranjal sir serves on boards of enterprises and non-profit entities, leveraging emerging technologies for sustainable, equitable growth. We are very privileged to have you here with us, sir. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Nikita, and thanks to MitKat and Sam and the team to invite me. And I've been listening into the conversations so far. It's both exciting and also helps us understand what we need to watch out for. I have a short presentation. I think I have about 10 minutes, Nikita. So can I share the screen and begin?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. So I hope people can see this.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So I'll just quickly run through this, and I believe later there will be a discussion where we'll be able to take some questions. So I'm going to talk about the Fifth Industrial Revolution, which is the new book which has been published by HarperCollins. It's about a $25 trillion creative destruction of business models across the world, in every single country, in every single market, in every single sector. And from a risk perspective, I think the main point I'd like to begin and perhaps end with later is that today there are three huge forces which are applying themselves on businesses. And these are, of course, emerging technologies, as we know. These are technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. So it's not as if the fourth industrial revolution is over, but the fifth industrial revolution is fourth plus more. And I will expand on that. These are the three big forces which are working on businesses. The focus on sustainability, the emerging technologies of fourth industrial revolution, and the impact on society, which is by themselves, they have been there, but the confluence of these three forces which are working simultaneously on every sector is creating a huge shift. I don't want to call it disruption because it also is creating opportunities, but it also comes with attendant risks. And I'll say that the biggest risk today will be in the fact that competition for new companies or any established companies or even a startup will come from sector that they don't even anticipate. And I'll elaborate on that in a minute. So this is effectively the equation for the fifth industrial revolution. ESG, SDGs, they represent different ecosystems, the funding ecosystem and the multilateral ecosystems. This is the architecture of the economy. So we're looking at basically this $25 trillion means that $25 trillion worth of business models are dying and shifting, and an alternate option is emerging across sectors. And if all of you reflect in the sectors that you are in, you will find that in the last 2 or 3 years to what is anticipated in the next 2 or 3, there are big shifts which are taking place. So subscription, and I'll go through them quickly so that we stay on time. So subscription economy is really about as a service model. People don't want to buy products, they want to use it. There's constant value which is coming. So it's not as if you buy a product for one day and after that it's lost its value, but the service providers and the consumers expect constant value. And of course, personalization, which is also phrases like mass customization have been deepening their presence. There are examples of this. You see that across every sector, and these are global examples. I'm not talking just about India or Asia. These are reflecting in various sectors across the world. So if you look at healthcare, if you look at Netflixization of most services, you will see that happening. Now, blended economy is where the key risk lies, which is that the business models are getting common across markets. But at the same time, what is fascinating is that competition is going to come from completely new sectors, and not from, if you are in a automobile sector, your competitor will actually come from somebody outside the automobile sector. And the most prominent and obvious example is Tesla. The entire global automotive sector was disrupted and shifted by Tesla, and it had no history of being in automotive. The focus on geopolitics and geographies is also there, so you will see a lot of nearshoring, and some of that reference has already been made. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much. But homogeneous business model also means that the business models will be common for certain communities, and geographies may not matter in those situations. Here is the example of how companies are changing. Auto companies are effectively, computer on wheels. So you don't need to be an auto component maker. If you have a strong technology platform, you can get a shell made with the wheels to buy it and make a car. Similarly, companies like who are in the steel business are now moving beyond steel to get into composites business, simply because new materials are really what are going to count. The old metals business is transforming itself. So even a company that calls itself, it's a global company with footprint across Europe and Latin America and Asia, is reorienting and reinventing itself. So from a risk perspective, I would say that a company like Tata is reinventing ahead of being disrupted by somebody else. Because as you look at factors of lightweighting in mobility in aircrafts, steel's demand may have plateaued out, but the real growth would be in new materials and new types of metals, which is where a company that can sort of identify that risk and recreate itself is going to be ahead of others. Autonomous is again focus on productivity, completely data-driven ecosystem, where every step of the value chain of a manufacturing or a service-oriented company will be mapping its data. How do you define the architecture of that data? How do you analyze it? How do you read the right signals from it? Your compute power, your structures to manage it in the era of Gen AI is also going to be quite fascinating. So this means that every company has to look at a lot of changes on many fronts simultaneously. These are again examples of how companies are shifting their focus. Energy company called Duke is working very closely with Amazon Web to look at smart grid solutions. You cannot just be a power generator; you have to be a power manager, energy manager. How do you ensure that in the era of EVs and renewable energy, you become a smart grid operator? Caring economy is actually the most critical part of it, because the theme today is people and planet, not just profits. which means that your cost of operations to manage societal impact and sustainability will go up much further, and you cannot shy away, which means your bottom line will be affected, and which means that your profit will be compromised. But while your shareholders may not be happy, the stakeholders are going to be definitely happy, because that's how a new regulatory environment is coming up. Some of you may have heard that regulators like e-safety commissioners have come up across the world. They will demand a lot more, not just about privacy and data protection, but also an era where whatever is done in a digital world does not harm citizens or consumers. Finally, I'll close on the talent economy, where we look at complete reinvention of corporate hierarchies, new roles, blended roles, and a lot of roles which were seen as fringe roles are going to be coming into the mainstream. And this is an interesting example which we saw last year, was that two extreme sectors, the Writers Guild of Hollywood as well as the Auto Workers Union, both went on strike, and both went on strike because of the fear of artificial intelligence. And what is combining and joining these concerns is the fact that while technology is creating a lot of excitement, it is also creating a lot of anxiety. And therefore, the social aspect, which I refer to in the caring economy, is going to be very, very important for every single company as we go ahead. With that, I will just share a couple of these thoughts about how new and constant learning and new roles are evolving. But the fact is that whether it's internal to an organization or external to its consumers and citizens, every company will have to be far more caring in what it does, even if it means higher cost. And I'll close on the point I began. The next new is really about the risk of competition coming from a sector that you never anticipated. And again, I'll give you a popular example. If you look at the medical devices industry, the biggest competition to them is coming from the wearable sector, where basic health parameters are being are available on your wristwatch and your phones, which means that the medical device industry itself has to reinvent to remain relevant. So risk today is about factoring these three shifts of technology, of sustainability and societal impact, but also being prepared for having a competitor from an area that you never thought they would arise from. So with that, I will end, and I'll thank you for your attention.
Dear Pranjal sir, that was very, very thrilling, and to hear from an industry expert like you. And it was indeed intriguing and very, very eye-opening. Now, since we're a bit behind, we would like to hear from our next keynote speaker, and I have the privilege to introduce Professor Martin Gill, one of the world's most outstanding criminologists, author of 15 books, including the third edition of the Handbook of Security, published in 2022. Professor Martin Gill is the director of Perpetuity Research and founder of the Outstanding Security Performance Awards, the Tackling Economic Crime Awards, and the Security and Safety Entrepreneurial Awards. Professor Martin Gill holds honorary visiting chairs at the universities of Leicester and London. A trustee of the ACES Foundation, fellow of the Security Institute, a member of the Company of Security Professionals, and a free man of the City of London, Sir Martin is the winner of several awards and recognitions, including the Imbert Prize at the Association of Security Consultants and Presidential Award of Merit for Distinguished Service by ACES. In 2022, Martin Gill was recognized by Security Magazine as one of the most influential people in security, and also received the Mervyn David Award from the ACES UK chapter for his significant contribution to the security profession. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you so much for the invitation to talk to you. It's a great honor. And when Sam asked me, I thought, well, I don't mind getting up at a very early hour to speak to the MitKat audience. And thank you for inviting me, Sam. Thank you, MitKat. Okay, so just 10 minutes. I wonder if I can make just a few points about the world of crime. I'm conscious that in 10 minutes, that's the most I can do. But global crime, what we now know is that crime becomes more common in areas where there's greater levels of poverty and where there's weak controls. What we also know around the world is that certain groups are particularly likely to be victimized. Strangely and somewhat difficult for some to take is the fact this too often involves children, both as victim. For example, the most common age of victim of trafficking is 12, and the most common age for male offending is mid to late teens. And when you begin to think about these sorts of issues, it begins to present the challenging that's facing the world. Perhaps the added dimension here is that ever increasingly offences that are taking place, and some of the most common, money laundering, drug trafficking, fraud and theft, cybercrime, are offences that can be undertaken in one country and have an impact in another. And herein lies the world challenge in responding to crime, that it's no longer the case that a crime in a country is that country's problem. The truth of the matter is crime in any country is everyone's problem. And against that, we have a world that's not geared up for that sort of response. Historically, law enforcement forces have grown up around problems in one country, often actually much more local than that in one community. And they're playing catch up with offenders who adapt very quickly. You know, one of the interesting things for me as a criminologist is I get to go into prisons and speak to offenders. And when you get the offenders side of this, you begin to realize the enormity of the challenge. Because what offenders say to me is committing crime is relatively easy. And I remember this I said this once in front of an audience, and they said to me, how can it be easy when you're talking to people who have been caught and are in prison? And my response is, because what they say is they're caught very, very rarely. And when they are, they take it as something that happens to them and they have to put up with it. But by and large, offenders are prolific. And when you ask them what stops them committing crime, what will put them off, it's not security. Security in itself is not the factor that puts them off. What does have a big impact, though, is good security. And here is a major finding from the world, is that when you look at studies, academic studies, that have looked at what impacts on the lower crime rate that many countries have seen since the beginning of this century, in fact, just starting in the last century in many places, when you look at all the reasons that it can be, one of the most significant factors is better security. More people having better security. And you know, around the world, that security too often acts under the radar. For something that's so significant, so important, so impactful, has such an enormity in terms of its consequences, it's so often under the radar. And part of the difficulty here is the perception of the security world is often not good. There's a sense in which it's seen as second-class citizen to law enforcement, not something that everyone wants to do. At least that's the view of some. Yet when I conducted a study of people working security, and I asked them about how they got into the security sector, by far the most common reason why people joined security was by accident. It was simply something that happened to them by chance. And yet when I asked them, why do you stay in the security sector? They said things like this: because it's a job that is very worthwhile, because I'm playing a part and an important role, tackling crime, making people feel safer, because I'm doing something that is worthwhile, because I'm serving the public, because it's got lots of opportunities, and listen to this, because it's well paid. Now, I wonder if you presented those to the world, how many more would be interested in coming to the world of security? Indeed, this is one of the great challenges. Why is it under the radar? Why is it so bad as a group at speaking up about how good it is? And in a minute, I'm just going to say 1 minute, because Sam asked me to, about the Outstanding Security Performance Awards, the OSPAs. But just before I get there, because that is about recognizing outstanding security. You know, one of the important points I want to make is it's not just important to highlight what's good. This is not an idle, nice thing to do just because people are working in this area and because they want to say nice things about it. It's because the impact of people in security sector not being good at their job is enormous. And the people in the security sector being good at their job is enormous. On the one hand, where security is effective, it poses a real danger to criminals. When security is ineffective, it becomes irrelevant and lulls people into a false sense of security. That's why we must celebrate the very best in security, recognize who they are, and start to emulate those who are successful at it. And you know, this is a task security professionals take on rather hesitantly. It's not something that they rejoice in. So just very quickly, if I can make one point. Sam asked me to talk about the Outstanding Security Performance Awards. Just to say, for those of you in India, these are on March the 14th at the United Service Institute of India in New Delhi. MitKat and my good friend Rajiv Martha, Dr. Rajiv Martha, are going to be hosting and organising a thought leadership summit in the afternoon, plus the recognition of those who are truly outstanding at what they do. And those who win in India will qualify for the global OSPAs, global recognition of those who are truly good at security. Because offenders tell me, when it's good, they're concerned. When it's not, crime is easy. And that's why we must take careful effort to make sure we recognize outstanding security from that that's merely average. Thank you. I'm conscious that we're behind schedule and you need to catch up.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really succinct, and it is our honor to hear from you. And you gave those insightful thoughts on the realm of crime and the role of auspice. And I request the audience to keep all those intriguing questions coming in. Please write them in the Q&A box and kindly leave your views, comments, and feedback in the chat box. So I think we are on time and we could start with our last panel for the day, which is Technology Risk Outlook 2024. And it will be moderated by Mr. Pawan Desai, alumnus of Stanford GBS, co-founder and CEO of MitKat Global Consulting, Singapore. His brief bio and LinkedIn profile are placed in the chat box. Over to you, Pawan, sir.
So I just took a few pointers and I'll take it from there. That the new era is going to be about economic warfare. But the difference is that this economic warfare is going to be using cyber as a platform, which is going to be a difference. So if you call cyber AI, that is what is going to be the difference in which earlier what we used to have and now what we need to have. I've taken some few pointers from Vijay. I think despite bad health, he gave us few pointers. I'll just credit him for all pointers which he has said. So as this thing is that the newer tech needs a lot of data for decision making. So earlier we were using tech, but where now the tech needs lots of data to take decision making. And the new risk assessment models are still archaic and they are old. They don't take these things into consideration. And the whole consideration of how do we look at the risk and we assess the risk is going to be drastically changed. And the models which are evolving in the AI and when we talk about AI, ML and every big jargons which all of us talks about at various places, there is a new concept for risk assessment which is coming, is called as FEAT, F-E-A-T, which is about fairness, explainability, accountability, and transparency. And that is where the new models are going to emerge. And again, a different side of audit is going to change drastically because the current audit has a checklist, it has background, it has. But the new AI and ML, what we are going to use in the technology, it will have biases, it will have drifts, and we don't have benchmarks for that. So how do we say it is correct, not correct? All these questions, I don't know the answers. I'm going to ask this with the great panelists which we have here. But before that, I'll just go back to Pranjal and seek your views that when you were at Davos and when you were looking at all these jargon amplifying at the world level on AI, ML, and everything which we are talking about, and how the world views at this these technologies which are emerging technologies and the risk which are going to come from that, and how the world views India and maybe the Asia Pacific region, and how does it look from the other side, and where should be our start point from?
So I think technology is fascinating today because it's egalitarian, which means everybody has access. It's no longer about legacy economies having control on technologies and the growth economies, seeking technology transfers, as it were, except for one or two defense-related sectors. AI-related technologies are open and available to all of us. So there is a huge shift, which means that the same tool, and a very powerful tool, is available to people from US to India, from Latin America to East Asia to Africa. Now, at Davos, one of the fascinating pieces that I saw, and I participated in several discussions, there are two parts to it, two pillars to it. One, if I can use this phrase, that there is there is huge excitement about Gen AI. There are so many business applications which are being discussed across sectors, but there's a huge fear as well. So one of the key things in Davos was that as Gen AI gets applied across sectors, how do you protect people? How do you protect businesses itself from it? It's, in some ways, it is like the a discovery of electricity and fire. If you do not control it well, if you do not put guardrails around it, it's going to burn your house down. It's going to shock you. If you can manage it well, channelize it well, harness it well, then it's going to heat your homes. It's going to drive your industries. Gen AI is at that same level where we have something which we all know is very powerful, but we just don't know how are we going to control and capture it in the best way possible. So that came across as a very strong view in Davos across so many different discussions, private and open, and there were actually discussions also about things around addiction to technology. How do you prevent vulnerable communities from the negative impact of technology? These could be young children. Suddenly kids you see around us, 5-year-olds are holding a mobile phone. What are the controls around the kind of content they have? What is the impact that those phones are having on their neural growth, their brain cells? Similarly, you look at the impact technology is having on humans, elderly people who are just joining the digital mainstream in markets like Asia and Africa. Suddenly, India alone, as you know, 500 million people have joined the digital financial mainstream using the digital technologies. But at the same time, we have issues of financial fraud which are rising. So I'll pause on the fact that technology offers terrific opportunities, mouth-watering opportunities, but also eye-watering risks, to quote a friend who said this recently.
I think great. I think I like the closing remark that mouth-watering opportunity and eye-watering risks. I think I'll build that up with Craig. I think you are in the midst of so many transitions which are happening, and I'll say security is one part of it, but the facility management, maybe the entire operations, what we talk about from the technology perspective. So there was a great point which you, when we discussed, we mentioned about the risk in the technology or the risk which are coming from technology. And the same thing was mentioned by Burgess in the earlier panel, in the first panel, that are we looking at the AI for cyber, which is there, or and cyber for AI, both needs to be protected and both needs to be worried about. So what's your thought about the newer risk and the risk to what we are developing, both sides?
Yeah, thanks, Pawan, and thanks for the invitation. I've just spent 2 days with tech leaders here at Grab, so probably been drinking the Kool-Aid for the last 48 hours. So I've probably come across quite quite pro tech, but two contextual points, and then maybe a thought for those on the call today. The first one that's come up over the last couple of days with AWS and many other global tech leaders is the balance of global tech power and the meteoric rise, at least in the space of Grab, of many of the Chinese platforms. They've clearly been very busy during the COVID period and have moved ahead with autonomous vehicles and various other leaps forward. The second is a point that's already been made, I think, several times today, is what appears to be giant leaps in innovation and very much shorter cycles in terms of those changes. We're likely, according to the experts that I'm listening to see smarter, more trusted AI models within 2 to 4 years, maybe even quicker, human level of cognition. Not far behind in the 4 to 6 year range, robotics. And these changes are not flashes in the pan from what I can see and hear. They're going to be very fundamental. They're going to break the existing technology systems. For us, folks like us managing risk, a few sort of rhetorical questions that I ask myself. Am I curious enough? Am I collaborative enough? That point came up earlier. Are my programs tech-led? Am I experimenting enough? Or am I fairly flat-footed, still operating off an old set of principles for what is a fast changing global economy?
Great. I think amazing the summarization on the what is happening in the industry and as security professional and risk professionals for us. I'll just move on to Graham on this. As Pranjal said that the boundaries have changed. No more there are bigger players. So I'll take you as representative of a bigger organization. The bigger organizations are known to be moving less agile and maybe less changes are slower. The processes are more maybe larger deliberations are needed. You are going to compete with very agile competition in the future, which are very small setups, which can change overnight. What are the discussions happening at your leadership level, and what changes do you see most of the bigger organizations to make change in the mindset when you are going to compete across the world? So competition can come from Africa, can come from India, can come from anywhere else, which was not the case earlier. And how are you changing as bigger setups and organizations?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a good question. I think there's a couple of points that I think have been raised, and I think Craig, highlighted some of the core elements, and it's about that agility, right? But I'm going to link it to a previous panelist, which was impact over activity. I wrote that down because I absolutely love that. And the core aspect is when you look at the agile approach from a technology perspective, is how does that improve the impact from a risk perspective or a response? So from our perspective, and we just saw your demo and things like that, it's, well, how does technology enable organizations to get information faster, right, and be able to make more agile decisions and response perspective from a response perspective versus that previous sort of approach, which takes time. We sort of throw people at the problem versus actually how can we consolidate and get information to the right people faster to actually make a more informed decision and an informed response. So I guess the core aspect is when we look at technology and how it can be utilized, a lot of that comes down to, well, how can the organization consume it? I don't think the issue sometimes is necessarily with technology, but it's how does it embed within the company and how the company then consumes that technology. Technology can empower people, but it's how does that person, an individual, consume it? That's where we see the bigger challenges coming with large organizations versus small. It's changing the culture, if you like, of that aspect. So that for me is the core points I would highlight.
No, thanks, Graham. I'll just change the question 180 degrees and see now large companies getting agile and starting to think about innovation and like Craig said, I think 2 days with tech leaders and things are changing so fast in the whole thing. How a company small like us, I'm considering both of us as small setups, make a mark in this world. Yes, we see an opportunity, but we see a lot of risks which are there. We can be wiped out overnight with the global maybe giants like Everbridge and companies like Grab. What we need to do better as professionals and as companies to counter this?
Mitesh, first of all, good morning, good evening, everyone, good afternoon. This has been very enriching conversation since last couple of hours. So much to learn from all panelists. And so this aspect of, being a smaller risk resilience, summit or, the people around here and professionals, I guess there has been not such an important time ever in the world than it is now from a risk management and resilience management perspective. In my experience, talking to people around the world has been risk management is taken very, very seriously. And at a point in time around pandemic, pre-pandemic, anything where you said no budgets assigned, risk management, nobody's owner, I think there's heavy focus on that from larger companies. Of course, the change management itself is a pain because these larger organizations go through a lot of protocols and processes before a ground level changes can start to happen. With this technology, it's a mindset change within the businesses and technology. And somewhere the convergence between how technology is enabling to the business, whether the head of operations, whether the CEO himself or the CTOs and CIOs. For a smaller companies like ourselves who are more service providers and enabling risk resilience, I guess innovation is the key. When it comes to innovation, I guess, talk about LLMs, large language models. Greg just mentioned talking about working ahead of time and ensuring those AIs, AIs could do more damage than, it could do, favor to the businesses if done in the right way. So, firms like us are working in the direction of creating our own LLMs. And because organizations are still privy to not accessing or giving data out in the open, which essentially is in the outside world on the cloud, whether it's government organizations, large banks, financial institutions, they want to keep the data still to themselves and still have those models work, ensuring you learn from other people's risk or around the industry risk, but still work on their own data. Don't want to give their data out to people, whether it's even generic data or a geopolitical data. They will have their own ways of managing the risk rather than saying, hey, let's do a coalition. Let's collaborate in ensuring what are those common risks and threats. It doesn't happen that way. I personally see a sea change in certain other geographies. Although we are Singapore headquartered, I'm based in Toronto, but our large part of business focus has been Africa, Middle East, Asia. And I think the entire Middle East is going through a major upgrade in the technology. The region is evolving into be the next gen. Maybe the West is still not there, but I think the leap is taken by regions who are in a way leveraging and learning fast from what others have not been able to do. So adopting the technology faster, but in a way which suits them well. Not very open about it, not very open to share views and their own data sets. So what Graham talked about from a data set, I think very, very critical. I saw on the Pranjal's presentation, I think decision making is going to be key. Efficiency building is a key in the future and growing the economies. I'll just take a pause on this.
Thanks, Nandan. I think great insights. And what you said about Middle East, and I was talking to somebody from NEOM, and I went to the website. It's mind-boggling. I think I'll request all of you who are listening to this, go through the site, what they are trying to create. If even 50% of that is true, it is still out of this world. It is still absolutely out of the world, and rest of the world is going to just do the catching game after that. So it's very I think I'll come back to Pranjal. You said a lot of opportunity which is coming up. And we talk about mainly the Asia Pacific. It's amazing. This is the decade or the next century for India and Asia. A lot of good things have been spoken about in the last 2 hours. I would like you to touch upon what are the risks? What are the things which will be the dampening to this whole story, which is a growth story, which you are building up for next decade or couple of 2-3 decades, which are there? What we need to worry about from people, technology, whatever you think we need to be wary of in this region.
So thanks, Pawan. I think we have to be aware of one very important risk, which all of you are looking at risk from cyber and physical security. But let me also flag something which is equally crushing for a company, which is brand and reputational risk. Please understand today that this year will be the year when most mobile phone companies will launch and have already launched GenAI embedded phones. So you'll have a chatbot powered by GenAI in the mobile phones. We are effectively giving a very, very powerful tool to people, individuals like us, who even all of us with all our experience get conned by fake images, videos, information. Now a bot like that inside your phone will allow nearly millions of people to create images willingly or unwittingly, or to create fake videos, fake calls, fake just about everything. This will also give, so one is that the impact on society and public discourse, and in open democracies, it's already we are suffering the impacts of misinformation and fake information. And heads of state and even at United Nations, this has been raised. But the other huge impact it's going to have is that people will create images which none of us will be able to collectively manage. Think about 1 million people creating fake images or audios or videos, and then instantly circulating it to thousands of people. How do you even counter that? And I say this, it is Asia Pacific for sure, because the new digital growth of digital natives will increase here simply because of the size of populations and the growth of economies. But it will impact the legacy economies as well. It's not that anybody will be unimpacted. But the big risk, there's the social risk, which I'm flagging, of what it'll do to the society. I don't know. But all I can say is it's not going to be something which, it's going to be a tsunami of sorts. And I don't think we are prepared really. Second big risk, which you see today to brands and companies and reputations, is again that anybody can create. Let's say you make chocolate. Somebody creates a fake video of a chocolate where a worm is coming out of it, right? It's circulated with a brand. You don't know who's done it. First instant reaction is to believe it. By the time a company realizes that it's a fake video or goes and communicates it to the rest of the world and its consumers, within minutes, it's too late. So one of the biggest risks, and that can actually destroy multi-billion or multi-million-dollar valuations and businesses for companies. It can be even worse for startups. You start a new financial service, somebody says, well, I had a fraud, and gives some kind of a fake proof for it. And before you know, that company collapses. Investors are going to be very jittery about that. So I think the new era of GenAI in the hands of a lot of people who may not know how to handle it or have the potential to misuse it is going to have a tremendous impact on democracies, the social fabric, and brand and reputation.
Amazing insight. I think, Pranjal, the social part of it, the psychological part of it, it's going to be the future. I'm very worried about the next generation. So because we have built or maybe our early generations were more trusting generations. Now you cannot trust anyone. So look at the fate of the new generation. They cannot trust anything. What earlier we say, we only believe what we see. Now we can't even say that what we see is truth. So I don't think so how the new generation is going to cope up with non-trusting, and you can't see, you can't, what you hear, what you see, you can't even trust.
So Pawan, that's a great point,
listen.
because
So
that's a brilliant point. Actually, I was going to say this, that the biggest risk today will be mistrust in everything that we feel and experience. While there's excitement around immersive technologies, but the mistrust is also going to be at very high levels.
Thanks for pointing that out. Craig, just follow up on what Pranjal said. One was on the social side of it, but companies like yours and others, what will be the problem or the risk coming from the accountability side of it? Today, a driverless car doing something wrong and something fatal incident happens and all those things. How are we going to work with a kind of an environment where and where the accountability, earlier the accountability was very, very clear. You can pinpoint to a person or now, how do you, so many people are in between, our companies are in between, or machines are in between. How do you build up the whole accountability model around it?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that humans stay on either side of the technical transfer, but maybe that's a bit self-serving. But at the end of the day, there's probably a business person and a customer person, with technology improving and sort of enhancing the experience in the middle. I think together with AI, there's now a lot of work being done on compliance and basically handrails to allow it to be more trusted. Because to your point, Pawan, the customer needs to trust in the service. Trust and safety is a phrase that came up, almost replacing corporate security in some cases, based on the importance of data, the importance of that trust in the product in these new disruptive businesses. But I'd like to make a point as well before we move on, which is that on this call today will be many people that I think can help companies navigate through these interesting times. So it's an opportunity, I think, for risk managers to really play a bigger part. I think we are well placed to be crisis leaders. I think we have incredible networks and contacts, and I think we're natural connectors in our organizations. But unfortunately, as Professor Gill mentioned earlier, maybe we ourselves don't recognize that.
Amazing. I think very well said. Very well said. Taking on to Graham on this, with the democratization of data, earlier the companies like yours were maybe thriving on the data, presenting the data, giving the data. With democratization of data, data is available now almost freely to every organization, every person, kind of a thing. How are the whole business model evolving to the next level of data is not the, as you said, data is not the new oil, but how do you consume and how do you create insights? How are companies like yours thinking on that value adds? So there are no more value adds. Value adds becomes the main business now. So what is happening on that front?
Yeah, I think when you look at the industry, I think that there's a couple of things that we really pride ourselves on. I tend to look at ecosystems, and when I look at ecosystem, it's how do we enhance existing investments and how do you actually bring value to those existing investments. So it's not about replacing, right? I think that the core aspect is within organizations, there's always like this rip and replace mentality. It's, well, no, actually, how do we derive value from what we've got? And then you flip that into data modeling, that the core aspect is organizations have huge amounts of data available to them. And you're right, there's huge amounts of data available that's for free and from different sources. I think this group on the call, I think that the security industry is great at sharing information between itself. I've seen risk intelligence sources, some of the best being WhatsApp groups, right? But it's how do you actually bring in that information and make sense of it? And that's the ecosystem connectivity. And for me, the core aspect behind technology and data modeling is how do I make sense of the data? How can I bring the specific data sets together to within an organization to make them consumable? Right? And again, it's going back to the screens you were showing earlier on are a prime example. There's lots of noise, but actually going back to that point, impact over activity, what do I care about and how do I then consume that data is really the core aspect for, I believe, data modeling in large organizations. Okay.
Right. Thanks. Coming back to Kundan, being small setups and being globally present. So it's a sort of a dichotomy, but the amount of compliance requirements across geographies increasing so much that setups which are smaller like us can actually get killed in the burden of compliances. So when you work in Europe, when you work in Middle East, when you work in Asia Pacific, when you work in Americas, the amount of privacy angle, the maybe compliance angle, which is tremendous, irrespective of the size of the organization. So how do you think smaller setups can deal with these kind of burdens?
MitKat, this is Mitesh, very challenging for smaller firms, even for larger organizations operating in different geographies. the regulatory environment could be very difficult. I think in one of the earlier conversation, Danny mentioned about a Singapore regulator could have a very different demand and ask compared to somebody in the EU or in the US or Africa, Middle East. First of all, I think one has to navigate through meeting those compliance regulatory requirements. Now, that's easier for a smaller firms because they are still agile. But for a larger firm, in order for them to have, continue to sustain and grow the business and ensure the risks are mitigated, managed, that's even more difficult because, the risks are ever going to be increasing. They are not going to come down. And an organization may find themselves prepared, but then they are never prepared enough to deal with a crisis or a risk where that happens. They will falter, but they can mitigate to a certain extent, and technology does play a role. So when we talk about this whole panel about technology risk, technology will play a significant role in the mitigation strategy. And that will be primarily driven with the amount of data that an organization has. Organization has all kind of data. It's just that all the data is sitting in disparate system. The larger the organization, the larger the problem. And all those disparate systems do not tend to talk to each other. There are vertical heads, there are different clouds, there are different applications. They just don't talk to each other. And it has not been today's problem. It has been a problem for a while. And this problem is only going to grow more. With AI blending in data, I think you have a quicker way of analyzing the data, but I think the industry is still evolving to a level where you have your own algorithms which can read the data and meet your expectation of what kind of risk do you carry and what kind of mitigants. So when we talk about a larger resilience level, resilience encompasses security, risk management, business continuity management, crisis management, cybersecurity, all in all put together. We saw the presentation on Data Surfer. You could predict risk, what possibly could happen, and then basis the risk, you say, hey, if this could happen to you, what are you going to do? But when this happens, that risk carries 3 more crisis angles to that. It's not just one. It won't bring in that risk. It will bring in 3 more or 10 more line items to a crisis or a disasters. The preparedness level is to a certain extent where organization can simulate basis the data, historical data, future data, predicting the data. And the data may not be enough, but then, one has to learn from, sharing the data within similar industries or different geographies. If one, bank in Singapore can go through a crisis, maybe somebody else in the world would have gone through a similar challenges in the world. Now, is the data available? Not available is the question. So with those regulatory requirement, I think it's a regulator themselves are constantly evolving. It's not that the regulators know it all. While they're imposing it, and I can share very personal experience of working with the regulators. This is equally a challenge for the regulators themselves around the world, because when they have to do it for themselves before they were to roll it out to their own licensee companies, whether it's in certain industries.
I think thanks. Great point, and I can endorse that you have been jet lagged because I'm Pawan. Mitesh took the earlier panel.
Sorry. Can I
that's
just come
the
in?
side, yes. Okay, just we have 3 minutes on the closing remarks, Pranjal. What maybe 1 minute from you and 30 seconds from other panelists. What we need to be excited about and what we need to be worried about very quickly.
I think we have to be excited about the fact that we are entering into a fantastic growth phase. Innovation, young companies, as Kundan mentioned, have so much new options. We are also going to be living in an era where monopolies are being constantly broken and challenged. Duopolies are being challenged. So I think there's a lot of excitement. The last mile delivery of products and services to citizens and consumers is being created in growth economies like India. So I think that's very, very exciting. And I think that what we're going to see in the future is a completely new shape of business model, right? And the digital public infrastructure is one example of that. But I think, again, I'll close with the fact that with all this excitement, it's, we're getting fast new cars. Everybody's getting to be in the driver's seat. But at the same time, you're also in a situation that if you don't have the traffic rules, if you don't put the right kind of safety elements and safeguards, that's going to be worrying to a lot of us as well.
I think that reminds me of saying that service your brakes when you need to drive faster. So I think that's, thank you. I think amazing insights, Pranjal. Craig, your closing remarks.
Yeah, so I'll try something aspirational, then come back to what I might really be able to get done. Aspirationally wise, I think doing nothing around the topic today is just not an option. I think it's a time to be bold. It's a time to be experimenting. And if you're not, then you're likely to be left behind. But what am I going to be focused on this year, given that I'm a big believer in blended risk, and there's a risk of complacency around some of the more traditional risks that our businesses still face. So I'm going to continue to focus on the foundational resilience that I provide to our operation. I'm going to be trying to look around corners and help the business with foresight. And I think crisis leadership, whether you look at it from a technical point of view, a geopolitical point of view, or a climate point of view, I think we have a big role to play to helping our companies navigate the complex world that we are operating in.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Graham?
Yeah, sure. I think it's been summarized quite well, but I think that the core for me is resilience is a journey. It's not a destination. And I think that the key behind that is although we're very excited about all of these things, we do have to be able to consume them. And I do believe it's a crawl, walk, run state that we need to get to when we're launching this in the organizations, and just not forget to do the basics. Sometimes they get overlooked. So from my perspective, yeah, it's about the journey.
Thank you. Kundan? You're on mute, Kundan. Kundan, you're on mute.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. So I'll pick from Danny's message. I think it's time to go back to basics, whether it's risk 101 or resilience, because once the basics are in place, whether, that's when you could leverage technology, mitigate the risk and be more resilient overall as a community, besides being an organization. I think the whole message around if a crime happens in one place, it could happen. So a risk happens in one place, one has to learn from what could go wrong to you. You could be severely impacted as well. Or it just the risk could come in a different way or a different style, but it can happen. So it's best to learn from somebody else's mistake.
Thank you. I think amazing insights from everyone. Thank you. I consider usually the last panel based on how many people were there. So we started a panel with 201 people on this thing. We still have 197. So I'm sure it was an amazing panel which was there. An equal number of people are there on the LinkedIn listening to us LinkedIn Live. Thank you, Pranjal, Craig, Rem, and Kundan.
Thank you,
amazing
Pawan.
insights. Nikita, all yours. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. I would encourage everybody to join me in extending a very big thank you to our esteemed panelists and to Mr. Pawan for making this an engaging and compelling session and giving us an understanding of the risks and opportunities of the present technological developments around us. So now, ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the end of the event, I would like to invite Mitesh sir to please sum up and provide us with some concluding thoughts. Over to you.
Hi, thanks, Nikita. I am definitely going back as a more learned person with applicable learnings that I can go back and personally and professionally that I can put in. I'll just do the summarization right from Sudhir sir. So Sudhir sir, our chairman, highlighted that this is going to be the year of elections. Domestic elections in the region will play a role in the regional geopolitical scenarios. He also highlighted that climate change is going to play a role, especially in APAC, because this region has adaptability issues. AI would be a thing for the new generation, and it will be an advantage for APAC because we are a much more tech-savvy region. Lastly, there was a lot of optimism about APAC. APAC is going to be the powerhouse of the world, and that would generate revenue for the world in the coming times. Then we had panel one. We start with Bruce. Bruce spoke about multipolar world, bipolar world, but he said that would be centered around Asia. There is going to be a balance of US, India, China that will drive growth in the region and stability in the region. Lastly, he highlighted conflicts in the region are going to rise, which are going to happen. Then we had Burgess. Burgess spoke AI for cyber and cyber for AI. One thing I liked about his thought was he spoke about how spending is changing. There's a shift in spending from prevention to more response and recovery, people are ready to do that. Cloud security trend is increasing. There is a lot of emphasis on privacy enhanced technologies that is going on. Lastly, he spoke about talent and resource skill talent will remain a scarcity. Investment in resources, physical resources, as well as tools in the cyberspace is going on a rise. Farah from London spoke about the political scenario in UK. She did not have optimism there. UK is in dire distress at the moment, but she was optimistic that Commonwealth will play a key role in the regional dynamics. Also, she highlighted cyber warfare currently does not get due attention, but in due time it requires the recognition that it deserves. Then we move to Pramod. Pramod is from Europe, started by saying that the region has the attitude of my way is the right way, which is not the right way to do. But he said that is going to change. Also, in the world of corporate security, the ways and means of attacks are changing. He highlighted the technology attacks are on the rise and conflicts are on the rise. But he ended on an optimism stating that if we want to progress, then we have to focus on security is everyone's responsibility. That has to be there. We had Dr. Cyprian. Dr. Cyprian highlighted about political risks that are going to drive the narrative in the region, with more than 52% population going to vote some way or the other. Climate risk is going to be a challenge, and he believes that the Ukraine-Russian war will play a role in the geopolitical dynamics. One thing that he highlighted was Black Sea region remains the heartbeat of that region and a point of interest in terms of geopolitical scenario. Nicholas highlighted that this is going to be a year of social turmoil, and I like the way he pointed three things. One was on acceleration in minilateralism, that I believe will happen more. Weaponization in corporate context will happen more, and I like one way he said that economic warfare will happen, but it will be softer and there will be an undertone around it. He said this era is the era of middle powers, the time of middle powers, which I strongly endorse. We had Irina also speaking about state-owned, state actor influence that will drive narrative in the region. Also, she said that efforts need to be intensified in pandemic prevention measures because accountability has not been yet emphasized. Lastly, she spoke about the organization needs to be much more watchful on insider threats. We move to my panel 2, which I believe was the most interesting one. So Danny spoke about polycrisis and the need of going back to 101 risk management 101. Threshold of compliance is different in each region, and that has to be measured. Morgan from Marriott spoke about use of data-driven metrics and cyclical terrorism to be watched out. Data-driven metrics to be used in organizations so that informed decisions and narratives could be formed. One thing I liked about Morgan was impact over activities that I would take up personally as well. Tyne from Hong Kong focused on what are the new age threats with regards to cyber espionage, ransomware, also highlighted the emphasis required on mental wellness that to be focused upon. He also encouraged organizations to be on a lookout on AI crafted messaging, fake news to be much more on the rise in the current times. Julian was highlighting this is a strange era of change in a way, but at the same time, he highlighted the emphasis on constantly innovating in terms of how things are good. And for an example, he's highlighted that unannounced audits could be done on suppliers to find out more findings. He emphasized on training, review, certification to be done at each organization level. Jimmy highlighted on the local context in Japan, where cultural safety has been there for a long time, but of late crime has been rising in and around the region to be taken up. With that, my panel ended. I'm going to tie up Pranjal Sir's, Martin's, and the last panel together. So Pranjal Sir spoke about the 5th industrial revolution. I like the two main things where a blended economy is going to drive the narrative in the future, and technology is available for everyone, but it's the way they use it. It could be good or bad. Technology is creating both, I like the term used, excitement and anxiety, which is going to drive the social narrative in the future. And lastly, also mentioned about how organizations need to be aware about brand and reputational impact, considering the phone would be in everybody's hand and everybody can do no damage on a brand by click of a button. Martin sir was more speaking about how the narrative of crime is changing, and crime is everybody's problem. It is not a particular country. A start of crime in a particular country can impact the entire region. And better security is key. Just security is not the key, but better security is key. One thing I forgot, Pranjal sir, which I'll take again was, technology brings about mouth-watering opportunity and eye-tearing risk. It's a great line to be taken out from by all of us. Moving to Craig, Craig highlighted that there is going to be giant leaps of innovation in a shorter duration, which we believe, within 3 years. I mean, 3 years back, there was we were not talking about, we're talking about blockchain, and then suddenly AI came in and we have forgotten about blockchain and talking about AI. I like the thought of the risk managers are in a good space to be crisis leaders if they take up the right steps forward. Lastly, he spoke about being, it is this time to be bold and experimental, which I strongly endorse as well, because this is the time to be innovative. Graham being a big tech influencer in a way, spoke about how tech is being an enabler for both response and recovery in the region. And it is not a time to have data, but it is how you use the huge data and remove the clutter and focus on the signals in a way that will define the thing. Lastly, he spoke about how resiliency is a journey and not a destination. That is something that I will take from this talk. We had Kundan Shekhawat spoke about how innovation is key, and spoke about LLM and other models that will define the way technology has been shaping up. Decision making and efficiency would depend upon how technology has been defined, used, and implemented in organization. Lastly, he spoke about how compliance has become a challenge, not only for larger organizations, but for smaller organizations who are looking to grow. So managing compliance would be a key in that aspect. With that, I would try to highlight that this was a great webinar wherein learnings were in different forms and shapes. In some way, it is learnings how you take back. And that's where I like Danny's point that we learn a lot, but it is not what we learn that defines, but how do we implement and grow with the learnings that will shape our future. Thank you, esteemed panelists, esteemed members, audience who have joined, taken out 3-4 hours of their work time to learn. This is an excellent opportunity to learn, grow without any agenda. Thank you, MitKat team, for organizing this. With that, I give it back to Nikita for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Mitesh sir, for that inclusive overview. Thank you for all our outstanding participants and for their engagement at MitKat's second event of 2024. And all our participants were indeed present across different time zones and on different social media platforms. Further, a detailed report of the APAC Mars 2024 event, as well as the certificates for all participants, will be available shortly. On another note, we are very thrilled to share that WISER 2024 Women in Intel, Security, ESG, and Resilience will be held on Thursday, 29th Feb, which will be followed by MitKat EMEA Risk Symposium on Thursday, 18th April. Please do save your dates. Everyone is welcome, and we eagerly anticipate your presence at these upcoming events. You can stay informed about all our future events by following our LinkedIn and other social media channels, links of which have been shared in the chat box. Additionally, if you wish to download the APAC risk review for this year, you can find the link in the chat box as well. And to book a demo for Data Surfer AI, please do get in contact with Sagar Bhanushali, whose contacts have been mentioned in the chat box. So we look forward to welcoming you to our next event. Have a great day ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.